Thank you. I think it's going to be as soon as he gets in. Is the mic is on? Is that better, Dana? Okay, the assistive listening system should be on as well. Actually, I'm Karen Peltz-Strauss, just so you know who's speaking. But before we begin, if the people on the right would not mind coming to the middle, you might be able to see the presentation better. It's up to you, but if you... Well, thank you very much. That's a great way to start. Well, speaking of that, we do have pen drives for anybody who wants them. And if you don't have a computer with you and you want the material sent to you, there's a sign-up sheet, or you can just let me know, or you can let Pam know. Or are there any other people from CAOD, the Outreach Division, in the room? There's somebody raising their hand in the back to, I'm always really bad with this, a little bit to the left of center. Find me. I'll find you. Okay, now we're going to begin officially. That's kind of a funny way to begin. I am Karen Peltz-Strauss. I am the Deputy Bureau Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, and we welcome you here at the FCC to the inaugural session of the 2012-2013 M-Enabling Global Briefing Tour. If the people on the panel next to me would please silence their phones, as well as anyone else in the room, we can get along with this tour. It is incredibly exciting for us here at the FCC to be hosting this event. As you know, this is the second M-Enabling event that we hosted. We hosted the first one in December, which was wildly successful with over 30 countries?
Yeah, 34 countries.
34 countries, and how many people?
375.
375 people. And not only was the event successful itself, but it really launched a new force internationally for accessible wireless technologies. I'm going to be, I have the honor of introducing our two panelists, introductory panelists for the welcome remarks. And you're going to be seeing me or hearing me, or both, throughout the course of the day, so I don't want to stay on any longer. You're going to be sick of me by the end of the day. Okay, so the first of our panelists is Janine Poltronieri. Yep. Okay, and she currently serves as Assistant Vice President at AT&T, where she focuses on policy and regulatory issues affecting the AT&T's mobility business. Prior to joining AT&T, she held senior positions at Motorola and here at the FCC. She began her career as an associate at Patton Boggs here in D.C., and she received her undergraduate degree summa cum laude from Fordham University and her law degree cum laude from Harvard Law School. Jim Tobias, I'll introduce you both at the same time, is president of Inclusive Technologies and has worked in the field of technology and disability for 25 years. I actually thought it was longer than that, Jim.
It's 35.
It's 35. There's a typo. I knew it was wrong. Beginning at Berkeley Center for Independent Living, he has worked as a rehabilitation engineer with schools, hospitals, private organizations, companies, and state and federal agencies. He worked for 10 years at Bell Labs and Bell Corps, providing telecommunications and disability consulting for Bell companies and other telecommunications and information industry clients. And his technical background supports inclusive technologies, hardware and software services, and consulting in accessibility. And while I'm new to Janine, I welcome you both. Jim and I have worked together for
35 years.
About 35 years. No, really I've only done this for 5 years or so. But it's a pleasure to have you both here, and I'm proud to have such esteemed panelists. Janine, would you like to start off?
Thanks very much for having me. And I have the task of, in the next 7 or so minutes, we will be going through.
Oh, I'm sorry. Janine, I'm sorry. I goofed just now. I would like to first pass it along to Axel. I'm sorry. And then we have the esteemed Dr. Hamadan Tori, who would like to give brief introductory remarks first. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Raise your hand.
All right. Is the microphone on? Okay, perfect. Good morning, everyone. I'm Axel Lebroy from G3 ICT, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all today and thank the FCC and Karen Pelstrauss and the entire team here for hosting this event today. We had a fantastic M-Enabling Summit last December, in large part thanks to our cooperation. And today is a very special opportunity for us to kick off that series, which will go to Beijing, Europe, Australia, Moscow, and then come back to Washington next June, and perhaps some other international cities. But the notion there is to take the momentum from last December and to actually share the fact that this mobile ecosystem around accessibility for persons with disabilities and seniors is really gaining huge momentum around the world. And so the notion there is to try to derive the best possible solutions and perhaps some of the best wisdom from users today, industry, and also try to find ways to see how the ecosystem can actually deliver on those promises. Because yes, technology is definitely bringing incredible solutions, but can they be made available? How should they be made available to seniors and persons with disabilities in an effective fashion? That's really what we want to bring this year in that Eco Global Tour to the industry, to users, to advocates around the world. Solutions that work and that are proven and can be replicated. One of our strategies at G3 ICT, we're a small non-profit organization advocating for accessibility of ICTs, launched to support the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We work very much with international organizations so that we can reach out to governments, industry, and advocates in all countries in an effective fashion. One of our partners who has been extraordinarily generous and supportive to us has been the International Telecommunication Union, which is the oldest UN specialized agency, in fact, and as you know, does all the standardization work for telephony, telecom in general around the world. FCC is an active member and participant in the ITU. Last December, Dr. Touré came and gave a keynote introduction here. He very nicely agreed to send us a video greeting for you this morning to tell you why, as an ITU, head of ITU, he sees this whole topic of M-enabling to be such an important priority. So if you can play the video now, that would be just perfect.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a great pleasure to welcome you for this M-enabling briefing session, which is being organized by G3 ICT, the Global Initiative for Inclusive ICTs, in cooperation with the Federal Communication Commission and the ITU, the United Nations Specialized Agency for ICTs. At ITU, we are committed to connecting the world, and I'm pleased to be able to report that thanks to mobile technologies, we have largely achieved this objective with more than 6 billion mobile cellular subscriptions worldwide and 2.3 billion internet users. ICTs are now within reach of almost all the world's people, even those in the poorest, most rural and most isolated regions in the world. But there is still one very large segment of society which is underserved and underconnected. I'm referring, of course, to the 1 billion people with disabilities of some kind or another who face accessibility issues. These include complex human interfaces which can be hard to use for those with cognitive impairments or learning disabilities, a lack of alternatives for people with poor eyesight or hearing, and handset ergonomics, which simply weren't designed for persons with physical disabilities. The majority of people living with disabilities are often invisible, either because the disabilities are not immediately obvious or because they have fewer opportunities to interact in everyday social life. But just because people are less visible does not mean they don't have the same rights to communicate as everyone else. Ladies and gentlemen, at ITU we take accessibility issues very seriously and have been working hard over the past years to address the issues from a number of different angles, and particularly through the work of our standardization and development sectors. All of our work in this area is designed to help achieve the goal of equitable communications for everyone, with a focus on accessible design, availability, and affordability. The ITU standardization sector has been working at improving ICT accessibility standards for some years. Indeed, several of our ITU-T study groups are now working on human factors and accessibility, and all of our study groups use an accessibility checklist when starting work on new standards. The creation and adoption of international telecommunication standards helps to promote the development of assistive products and services that are interoperable on a global basis. These can be simple improvements such as standardizing telephone service pictograms, symbols and icons, or more complex ones such as defining the requirements for sign language and lip reading in video materials. Distinguished colleagues, turning now to ITU development sector, we also do valuable accessibility work here in helping our member states understand and meet their obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, encouraging the exchange of best practices, helping to develop and promote policy guidelines and provide policy advice, developing pioneering projects such as a text-to-speech engine in the Mongolian language, and creating greater awareness through conferences and publications. A good example of this last activity is a thematic report we published in cooperation with G3 ICT on making TV accessible, which is available for free download on the ITU website, and the forthcoming report, Making Mobile Phones and Services Accessible, which will also be freely available from ITU's website. Another very positive result of our cooperation with G3 ICT has been the development and launch in 2010 of the E-Accessibility Policy Toolkit for policymakers, which has already become a primary reference in matters of ICT accessibility among international policymakers. I think we can all agree that sharing good practices and solutions that can work to benefit anyone with a disability is a necessity for all stakeholders. The Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities clearly defines ICT accessibility as an imperative. The majority of ITU member states have ratified it and now seek to actively ensure that mobile accessibility and mobile assistive solutions are widely available and affordable. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close by emphasizing the power of partnership. Through partnership, we are here today, and I'm delighted that G3 ICT took the initiative in getting us all together to collaborate globally on promoting mobile accessibility through the M-enabling summits and briefing sessions held around the world. Getting all the stakeholders together to share solutions which are workable and sustainable from both a technical and business standpoint is beneficial to all. In a world where 1 in 7 people suffers from some kind of disability, we must make ICTs not just more accessible in themselves, but also leverage the incredible power of ICTs to drive innovative solutions that work for all. Global cooperation, sharing of good practices, and economies of scale can help achieve this objective. I wish you a productive session and look forward to our cooperation.
Before we begin with our panelists, I do want to do one more thing, and that's to introduce the Disability Rights Office staff. We have Greg Leibach, who is the chief of the office. If you wouldn't mind standing, Greg. And anybody else from the Disability Rights Office that's in the room, if you wouldn't mind standing, just so that people can know that you're here, and we are very, very dedicated staff. I just thought that I would let you know that some of them are in the room if you have any questions. Okay, Janine, thank you for your patience, and you are now on without further ado.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, for inviting us here today. I have a charge in the next 7 minutes, to go through approximately 35 years of wireless technologies. And I had my caffeine this morning. I had my Diet Coke, so I'm ready for the challenge. Although it is Monday morning, so it may be a little bit more difficult than perhaps on Wednesday would be. I'll give you a little bit of background, an overview of where wireless technologies have been, a little bit of historical context. Then we'll talk a little bit about where we see the trends going, and then at the end we'll talk about some of the challenges. Thank you. So what I wanted to do first was to put the wireless revolution in a little bit of a broader context. It's not just a wireless revolution that we've seen. What we've really seen is the next generation of computing. So back in the 1960s, we started with the mainframe computers, where you had very large rooms that were dedicated to computing, and people would sit in those rooms and do punch cards so that they could do their coding for the computer. Then that moved into offices. Then it moved to the desktop with personal computing at home, as well as offices, people having individual computers on their desks. Then we networked those computers so that they could have even more power. And that's when we saw things like search engines like Google develop. And then finally, we have brought computing to the person. And that has been the mobile internet, which has brought the computing power that used to sit in a room where a mainframe computer was. That computing power is now brought to the palm of your hand in something like a smartphone device or a tablet device. So we're seeing how that transition has taken place and how mobility is allowing the computer to, all that power to come to the individual. Wireless technology has been the fastest global diffusion of any technology. And we've surpassed 3.3 billion active cell phones on the planet in about 26 years. That has been faster than any technology, even the polio vaccine. So thinking back to 1983, which wasn't that long ago, we had the first commercial cell phone service launched in Chicago. And that was a large brick phone that could only be used for voice calls. In 1992, again, not that long ago, we had the first commercial text message launched in the U.S. In 2011, in the U.S., we had 322.8 million wireless users, and that's 102% of the total population of the U.S. So obviously, there's just been an exponential growth in the technology. So wireless networks, as they've progressed, have gone through a network evolution and are actually on their fourth rebuild of technology. So this is the family of Gs, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. You see those on advertisements, and the marketing people take these terms and kind of appropriate them. But what you need to know is the more Gs, the better, in terms of the amount of information that can be transferred. For example, on 1G, if you looked at a 1-minute streaming video, you couldn't, because the 1G service was just for voice. If you went to 2G, it would take 2 minutes for 1 minute of streaming video to download. 3G, it would take 20 seconds, and 4G, it would take 8 seconds. So obviously, as we've gone to 4G, we have a lot more bandwidth, we have less latency, and we can allow for very powerful technologies like video conferencing that would allow people to sign to each other in almost real time, and accessing technologies in the cloud like voice recognition technologies. 4G, which is where we are now, is about 4 times faster than 3.5G. We look at speeds of about 10 megabits per second, and it has an IP core architecture. That's important because it makes it very easy for people to write applications to. It's also a global standard, which also helps in terms of accessibility, because when you write to it, you have a very large addressable audience. One of the major trends that we see right now with the 4G and with data is that the interest in having data has just exploded. AT&T, where I work, has been at the forefront of this because we were the first to introduce very data-heavy devices like the iPhone and tablets, so we've seen it first. But all forecasts from anyone, not just industry, but for third parties, anyone looking at this, including the FCC, sees the exponential growth of wireless. And we at AT&T have seen a doubling every year since 2007 in the amount of data that people are consuming. So in the past 5 years, the data traffic has gone up 20,000%, and that is just an incredible, incredible growth. And that is seen across the industry. And here I have some Cisco forecasts that has 108% compound annual growth rate for data from 2009 to 2014. In terms of challenges, I think the major challenge that the industry sees is the amount of spectrum. Spectrum is the lifeblood of wireless technology, and if the data that people are consuming continues to increase exponentially, we need more spectrum. If we don't get more spectrum, in about 2015, we will pass the point where we are out of additional spectrum to meet the needs of the customers. So that has been a topic of a lot of discussion here at the FCC. In the U.S., there are 2 sources for spectrum. One is government spectrum, and that's NTIA is the group that looks at that and makes that available. And the FCC deals with all the issues relating to commercial spectrum. And we've recently seen legislation come out of Congress that allows for some reallocation of broadcast spectrum on a voluntary basis. So that is the big challenge that we see to being able to address the demand in data. And so lots of conversation here about that. And so I hope I gave you a quick tour of wireless in the last 35 years. And now Jim will talk about some of the specific issues that are of interest for people with disabilities.
Thank you, Janine. I don't know if my slides are up yet. There we go. Oh. I'm reminded of the story about the lonely Bell Labs researcher who wanted to get married but couldn't find a romantic restaurant to propose in that had a slide projector. and so he remained single his whole life. I'm also glad to note that nobody has started the clock. So my 7 minutes have not begun yet, but I'll be responsible anyway. What I want to do is go over some of the same historical era that Janine spoke about from the context of accessible telecommunication services. So if we go back, there we go. Okay, if we go back to that era, when the TTY was the latest thing on the block. We have a relatively simple architecture. You know, you have a phone and you connect your TTY to it, or you connect it to the phone line and you place a regular call through the regular phone network, and you reach at the other end a phone that's also equipped with a TTY, because those were the only calls that you could make with a TTY. If the person at the other end of the line had a TTY, it's the only way you could communicate by text. So we added to that in the late 80s, and then through the ADA Title IV, we added the relay service. And this was an incredible innovation. It was essentially an additional network or network-connected capability that allowed people with TTYs to call anywhere, anyone, by using a TRS communication assistant who would translate text to speech and speech to text, so that you could finally communicate in your preferred, coming from your preferred method of communication, going to the recipient's preferred method of receiving that communication. An incredible advance. And we see that only because of the laws and regulations that came into effect. We had a voluntary relay service, but it really wasn't fully implemented. So it took the ADA and this commission to make it happen globally, inside the U.S. anyway, and universally. So what have we added since then? Well, we added, as Janine referred to, the data text network, the pager network, which was interesting in that it allowed people, untethered, to communicate by text back and forth in, SMS type chunks of text. With anyone else who had a pager that matched that capability. So we keep going back to the initial slide. It's like a Groundhog Day for a presentation. So if you had a two-way pager, you could use it to communicate with any other two-way pager, and it was a great advance because people didn't have to be, all alone by the telephone waiting for a call. They could do it wirelessly, and that's a tremendous innovation. And something else that's worth noting is that this was done without any regulatory connection. This was a techno-cultural advance that occurred on its own because the products that the market provided were available at a reasonable rate and good functionality, and it just attracted a huge number of consumers, and word spread like wildfire. And that's how, we expect markets to work. So the first two examples, I think, give you a regulatory-driven success and a market-driven success. And I think we see those all the time, and the trick is always figuring out, for any given technology, which is going to be the best route. Are we going to have a hybrid, et cetera, et cetera? But moving on from there, we continue to add functionality, and that's the message that I think we're going to hear about a lot today. So now we have a video capability, another overlaid network based on the Internet that allows people to use really their preferred method of communication, sign language, to communicate either directly with people who have video phones so that they can sign back and forth to each other without any special intervention, and also the video relay service, which is the same as TRS in that it allows me to use sign language to communicate out to the world, and the recipient, or the person at the other end of the call who doesn't know sign language, to receive that information in a way that makes sense to them. So again, it's this customization, it's kind of automatic accommodation, it's a network availability, very powerful way of including by design and by regulation people who would otherwise be excluded or forced to use a second-class method of communication. So what do we have in these examples? And I think we have kind of a pattern here that is not just in the accessibility world, it's throughout wireless and really throughout ICT in general. We have interoperating elements here. On the hardware side, we've got these wonderful gadgets to carry around that have an operating system built into them. They have network connectivity natively. We don't have to slap on a modem. It's built in that these things want to hook up with a network. And there are applications of various sorts, mainstream applications usually, that allow us to do things like email and messaging and obviously voice and things like that. Then we have the network element in the center that's providing the basic network functionality like transport, getting the data to go back and forth correctly. And there's storage of things like voicemail and video mail and other data on those networks. And there are application servers that allow us to use the power of these mobile devices to generate lots of value to ourselves as the owner and user of the device, and lots of general value to our employers, to our educators, and what have you. And then we have this kind of new player, the software world, that is adding on this high customization and high personalization of value, both into the hardware and into the network. Things that you can add. And I mean, I don't know if anyone's working on an app right here, right now in this room, but if there is no one, this room is an exception. I think any room with this number of people in it, where a couple of people aren't building an app right now, is rare and getting more and more rare. So you're adding these capabilities that individuals want, and they're finding them somehow, and I'll talk about that challenge in a minute. And they're accessing content. And more than just accessing content in a passive role, they're creating content. They're able, through these software applications and the hardware and the network, to be not just recipients but generators of content. Blogs and Facebook and Twitter and all of the ways that we have of exciting and bringing more people into the conversation. So it's extremely powerful addition to the wireless network and ICT in general. So we have a lot of choice. We have a lot of consumer choice. I would say, for me anyway, given my age, perhaps there's too much choice. It's hard for me to figure out what my next phone is going to be or what app I'm going to download next. And that is a real challenge. And the FCC has done a lot of work in understanding that problem and in generating solutions to that problem, but there's still more to be done. In addition to finding the products that we want, we know that once you get a value chain that's so long, you've got the hardware manufacturers, and you've got the operating system folks, and you've got the network operators, and you've got the applications out there. It's very diffuse, and any one of those links is being upgraded at this moment. So if you're not writing an app, someone's changing an app that you already have, or writing a change to the operating system that's going to change how you use your ICT. And that ferment, that constant change, is something that we have to manage as well. And the accessibility angle on this is always tenuous. It's always weak because it's not a huge market attractor. It's sufficient, we believe, in many ways. It just has not been enough in most domains to get the automatic market reaction that we need to see. So there's basically a minority of players at all of these link points who really care enough and a lot about accessibility to make those changes on their own due to laws and regulations or due to the fact that it's part of the market that they care about. So what are we going to be seeing on the technology side? And we'll be hearing more details today, and I look forward to hearing about it. We're already seeing gesture recognition, that you can swipe your tablet computer, or you can wave your hand in the air and have it mean something, and a more natural interaction by voice and by other techniques to communicate with the device and with all of the functionality that's on the other end of the device. We're going to be seeing more context, more understanding of where the user is geographically. What are they trying to do? Are they at an ATM? Are they trying to buy tickets to a ball game? What's the function that they're trying to perform? And you can think of the accessibility implications there, especially for people with cognitive impairments. We're seeing more rich content and more connections and functions in general. And I'm going to accelerate here a little bit. and just leave you with the understanding that I have currently is that the challenge that we have is, as I said at the beginning, understanding where regulation needs to exercise itself and where the market is sufficient in performing it. One additional area is the area of information services. People outside this room and outside the advocacy community are having a lot of trouble finding what they need to use. You see it even if you hang out on the listservs and blogs that have to do with accessibility. The level of information, even of the inner circle, is not sufficient, and we need to understand that. We need to quantify it. We need to find out who the non-adopters are, who the late adopters are, figure out what works in reaching out to them on the market side and on the government intervention side, so we can truly universalize the accessibility that we're building in to these networks, these devices, and these pieces of software. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim, and thank you for Janine. That was superb, a superb start to the day. We're going to call the next panel, but before I do, I also want to welcome some other representatives from other federal agencies here. I see David Capozzi and Tim Cregan from the Access Board, Paul Schaefer from the State Department, and Debbie Kaplan from the Social Security Administration. If I've missed anybody, thank you. It's always helpful to have inter-agency coordination on these kinds of events. So now I'm pleased to present to you the user panel, where we will be hearing live testimonies on the benefits of mobile accessibility and assistive technologies for seniors and people with disabilities.
Am I here?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Isn't it Paul Schrader? Who else? Yeah. I am on this panel. Can you make sure? Because I thought that was the one I was on.
It was like at the end.
Oh, sorry.
Share. You okay?
Yeah, I think so. Hey, how you doing? This one.
Is the microphone working?
I don't think so.
I'm going to steal your microphone here for just a sec. Oh, sure. So to chair our user panel now, we have Paul Schroeder, who is the Vice President, Program and Policy Group of the American Foundation for the Blind. As Vice President of Programs and Policy, Paul oversees all of the AFB national programmatic efforts in aging, education, employment, literacy and technology, as well as AFB's public policy and research agendas. Paul is intimately involved in AFB's technology initiative, including efforts to encourage the development of mainstream products and services that are accessible for persons who are blind or have low vision. Paul also collaborates with other organizations working on policy matters in the field of blindness and visual impairment. His policy expertise and activities include the areas of telecommunication and technology policy, vocational rehabilitation, education, and public health. Paul earned his BA in political science and international studies from American University in Washington, D.C. I must say Paul has been an incredible supporter and participant in some of our most important G3ICT programs. So thank you so much, Paul, for helping us again today.
Thank you very much, Excel. I'm just putting my hand up so we can get this microphone. Thank you. Paul Schrader, American Foundation for the Blind, and very nice to be with you this morning. And thank you, Excel, for the intro. Now, I've already thought of a first app that I need, which is kind of a combination of the old Wild Kingdom where we tag the animals and then track them. I actually have no idea who's sitting where on my panel because we didn't get a chance to interact. So I would have had Marlon Perkins here to wrestle everybody down. Or no, I guess Jim actually did that and tag them so then I could app who was where. So since I don't have that opportunity, what I'm going to do quickly here is ask if we could go from the far left as we're facing the audience. That's going to be your far right. Like the way I turned that around. So my far left on the panel, just kind of say your name and organization, if only because I want to know who's sitting where on my panel. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. Kathy Bodine.
Thank you.
Yep. John Herzog, Federal Communications Commission.
Peggy Remus, the Oasis Institute.
Gallaudet University Technology Access Program, and I'm talking through interpreters today.
Ari Naaman, Autistic Self-Advocacy Network.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you going through that. Now, the other advantage we're going to be talking about, as you know, the practical advantages of mobile technology, particularly looking at applications and services for people with disabilities and seniors. And I'm thrilled that we have this panel gathered together this morning. In some cases, these are some voices that we haven't heard from as much in this discussion, and I think it's great to have individuals speaking on topics that maybe haven't gotten as much attention in the app and mobile technology area. The other advantage of mobile technology is it gave me a chance to be relatively ill-prepared with my panel in the fact that I didn't know where they were sitting. That's one point. The second one is that I decided to change things up a little bit, and I know at least two of them were like me this morning, maybe copping a quick look at email, which we all do too much, right? So what I suggested is that we, instead of having each person kind of go through the topics that were asked for us to talk about, what we would do is kind of take them separately and go through the panel and talk a little bit about technology and applications. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk for a little bit about the barriers and benefits that mobile technologies have brought to the communities that these individuals represent. We'll talk a little bit about the applications or services that have proven especially useful, look at features and apps that may still be needed, and we'll see if Jim Tobias is right and someone actually will write an application before the morning's done to meet one of those. And then maybe we'll look a little bit about what new technologies are coming and how we can take advantage of those new technologies for people with disabilities. Just one last thing, and that's shameless plug time. Certainly, we spend a good bit of time on this effort at the American Foundation for the Blind, not only in now beginning to look at developing apps ourselves, but also in looking at accessibility in the mobile space. It's probably the most, actually easily the most popular topic in our technology area on our website, and that area is called Access World. It's a kind of a publication that's available on the web to anybody. So afb.org, Access World. That may be the last shameless plug I give. We'll see. So why don't we just go in order for this round? And Kathy, put your hand up so they'll turn your microphone on. And Kathy Bodine, who is with the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine at the University of Colorado, Denver, and also provides advice as an advisor to the Coleman Institute on Cognitive Disabilities. I wonder, Kathy, if you might say a word or two about mobile technologies and the barriers that have been overcome as a result of mobile technologies in the community that you're most closely associated with.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. One of the things I think is so fascinating to me is that 10 years ago I was begging for interest in cognitive access, and finally we're there. So it's a really exciting time, and I think for me that's the premier advancement. You know, it was easier to deal with vision or hearing access than it is to deal with cognitive access. That said, in talking about some of the barriers, one of the things that I see as a critical need is a recognition that all of the advances that we're receiving and the quick turnover and all of those things, people with cognitive disabilities, generalization is a number one barrier for them. In other words, if you learn something and then it changes, it's very, very difficult to start again. And of course, with this rapid pace of change, it makes for an interesting situation for people with cognitive disabilities. We do a lot of work with all types of cognitive disabilities as well as seniors, and some of the things that we see are that the more the technology does, the less accessible it becomes for people with cognitive disabilities. And I think that that's a critical issue that we need to think about. I also think that we forget sometimes that the infrastructure in the U.S. anyway, in order to have these devices and technologies and access paid for, is based on a medical model. It has to be medically necessary. It's really difficult. Thank you. It's really difficult to justify access to an app under a medical model. We fought for the last 5 years. We finally have iPads approved by Colorado Medicaid for people with communication disorders. But they don't pay for the service, the $30 or $50 a month, and they don't take into account the accessibility of these technologies and how inaccessible they can be for people with disabilities. So I'm not going to take any more time because I know we're short. So.
Thank you, and we'll have a chance to we'll keep working through the panel and have a chance to come back and talk a little bit more specifically about some other topics. Thank you, Kathy, for getting us started perfectly well. John Herzog, put your hand up so they'll get your microphone, and also same point to you, benefits of mobile tech and barriers that have been overcome recently.
Well, thank you, Paul. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a visually impaired consumer of mobile technologies, and I think some of the barriers that have been overcome recently, to put it very shortly and very succinctly, mobile technology has allowed blind people increased independence in almost every area of life. In terms of travel, we have GPS applications now that give turn-by-turn directions, but they also allow us to see what streets we're going to come up to before we get there. Some of them even allow us to explore the streets before we step foot out of our houses, which is very nice. It's akin to looking at a map for a sighted person. But you also have little things that you maybe could live without, but you don't know how you did because it just makes a world of difference. For example, money identifiers. It's been a problem up until recently that you didn't know how much money you were getting back in a store. And now using Darwin Wallet on Android or the Looktel money reader on the iPhone, and there's a few other apps too that can do this. Very quickly, also, just social networking is a lot easier to do on a phone. Foursquare, Twitter, Facebook. Those websites are not very accessible, and there are still some problems with certain applications, but it's a lot easier to do, to access on the mobile phone, not to mention the fact that you can check in on Facebook and Foursquare, and you can see who's around you. I mean, it's a pretty cool thing to be able to use your phone to see if any friends that you know are in your general vicinity. It's kind of like looking around the room, sort of. It's pretty cool. Some of the barriers. I recently put on a demonstration about mobile phones at the Martin Luther King Library here in D.C., and my eyes were really open to some of them. One of them is people don't know what's available for each phone model. There are a lot of different phone models, and some of them are more accessible out of the box than others. Some have magnification, some don't. Some have large keys, some don't. And in addition, because of the custom software that phones run, some of them work better with third-party solutions than do other models. And so it's really a question of what's out there, what carriers will subsidize the software that I need, do I need to pay for software, and who can help me set it all up. A lot of people, they might have heard about free software, but it's another thing to actually know how to get that installed and get that all working so that when they go home, they actually have a usable phone. I don't want to take too long of a time either, so I'm going to pass it on to the person to my right here.
Thank you. Thanks, John. And I think Peggy Remus is next, the National Connections Program Manager for the Oasis Institute. And I apologize, John, that I didn't properly introduce John as, of course, right here at the Federal Communications Commission, working on a number of issues. Peggy, same question to you.
Good morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about the senior population. Oasis is a national nonprofit, and we promote successful aging through lifelong learning, healthy living, and social engagement. And so the program that I head up is a technology training program. And certainly the advances that have been made have done some wonderful things for older adults in the area of social isolation. People who are retired or who are homebound or who are simply just alone much of the time now have the ability to connect with other people, and sometimes people very far away whom they otherwise would not have the opportunity to see. And so the advances and all those apps that go with them are extremely important and certainly have made a difference in many people's lives. But I want to bring up a barrier that I think we don't hear talked about very often. It is directly addressed by what we do, and that is one of the barriers, in addition to whatever accessibility needs are there, is a person's inability to either know about it or to learn about it. And training, both hands-on and in other ways, mostly hands-on, in-person training is extremely important to this particular population. And it is often put aside or left behind as people are certainly, as they should be, very focused on getting the right apps out there, getting people the accessibility they need. But if someone knows that it's there and they are afraid of it or they are uncomfortable with technology, they're not going to use it even if it's there. And so what we do is help people learn in person how to use whatever that technology might be and how it can affect them and help them.
Very good. Thank you, Peggy, very much. We'll go on to Christian Vogler, who is a professor at Gallaudet and, of course, directs the Technology Access Program as well as an RERC, a Rehabilitation Engineering and Research Center on telecommunications at Gallaudet. Christian, same questions to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So the first topic of the panel today is talking about applications. Really, deaf and hard of hearing people use mainstream applications, and there are a few unique applications for deaf and hard of hearing needs. I think it is important from our perspective to go back to the basics. There are some important issues coming up again and again. The first of which is closed captioning on videos, as well as video relay services. The biggest caption with closed captioning is those not being available yet on mobile devices. For example, Android is able to have captioning on YouTube, but it is not the same on the iPhone. Additionally, there are special applications used for video relay services. But people are not using them very much as of yet because there are two main problems. Sometimes the network plan is either too slow or too costly. Also, VP applications are not interoperable and are not able to communicate with each other. So any mobile device online or a networked phone should be able to use a phone number to have a call, and they should all be able to connect to each other. But deaf and hard of hearing people, as of yet, are still blocked from that service, which is quite a frustration.
Thank you. Sorry. Appreciate that. Yeah, I needed that visual cue. Again, somebody work on that app. Appreciate it. Want to go to Ari Naiman, who is the president and co-founder of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Ari, a little bit, again, from your perspective, and remember to raise your hand so they'll cue your mic, on what mobile technologies have meant in your community, in particular the barriers that have been addressed.
By all means. Is my mic cued?
I think it is.
Oh, excellent. So the autistic community faces sort of three broad areas of interaction with mobile technology, both with regards to benefits and barriers. And they're all fairly different, in part reflecting the fact that the autism spectrum is very broad and diverse. One of the ones that was mentioned earlier is the use of mobile technology as well as tablet technology as a mechanism for augmentative and alternative communication, particularly for non-speaking autistic people or people with other developmental disabilities, or those who may struggle with speech, oral speech at particular points in time, particularly periods of high stress. So, for example, many of us on the spectrum will take an augmentative communication device with us while traveling, even if we do have the ability to speak, because, for example, going through airport security or other types of settings are high-stress occasions when people often lose some of their communication abilities. Now, mobile computing has been actually a great boon to this, because it means that now, instead of having to purchase a $16,000 Dynavox, you can get a $600 iPad and install, a $200 Proloquo app. The challenge being, of course, as was mentioned earlier, that state Medicaid agencies as well as school districts are often very reluctant to purchase a more functional piece of technology, even though it's cheaper, because they fear that there is going to be this massive woodwork effect of people with disabilities demanding their free iPhones or iPads or what have you. So that represents a challenge that's mainly in the area of public policy. The two other areas of benefits and barriers, I'll go through them very quickly. First, there's been a tremendous community building role that online technologies in general, of which mobile computing is certainly one major access point, have played for the autistic community. The Internet is, as a medium for communication, much more friendly to the communication styles of those of us on the autism spectrum. There's no nonverbal communication, which is something that many of us struggle with or are not terribly fond of. Everyone has trouble understanding sarcasm on the Internet, so that works out well for us too. Consistent with the characteristics of the autism spectrum, it can often be considerably easier if you can find the community of people who share your focused interest in a particular topic that may be more difficult to find in a particular geographic area. The challenge, of course, is, given that the autism spectrum is so broad, there are large segments of our community that don't yet have access to online technologies at all. Karen asked me to mention that I also serve on the National Council on Disability, and I bring that up because NCD issued a report on digital inclusion last year, and one of our recommendations was that we should begin to look at the use of digital technologies and digital literacy as a instrumental activity of daily living. And currently, the Medicaid program, if you're on a Medicaid HCBS waiver, will pay for you, for example, to learn how to use a telephone but will not pay for you to learn how to use online technologies, and that can be very important for people who also have intellectual disabilities. And then finally, the mobile computing in particular has proven useful for what we might colloquially refer to as a form of cognitive prosthesis, so to speak, which is to say, for people with cognitive impairment or for people with executive functioning challenges, which are challenges relating to organizational skills, time management, things of that nature, which are very common in the autism, developmental disability, and learning disability community. Apps that relate to navigating public transit, organizing one's day, even assisting with basic hygiene and things like that can be extraordinarily helpful. And there's been a lot done for the general public that's been useful here, but there's still a need to build a stronger basis of collaboration between the self-advocate community and app developers on this, given that much of what's been done in the autism disability world and that's been designed specifically for our community, has primarily been done through the province of the professional or provider world, and as a result is often considerably less functional than the self-advocate community might want it to be.
Thank you very much, Ari. Let me toss things around a little bit, and we'll start with you, Peggy. And I think, Ari, you really kind of introduced this topic quite nicely. Obviously, one of the advantages of mobile technologies over the last few years in particular has been the advent of apps designed to do any number of specific and broad things using those mobile technologies. Peggy, talk for a little bit, if you can, about the apps that have been beneficial, apps or features that have been developed that are beneficial for the aging in the community of people who are aging, and what's needed, what still needs to be addressed, put some challenges out there for the developer community.
It's really very difficult to actually pinpoint certain apps, because when you talk about the aging community and when you talk about this particular population, we all know how quickly it's growing. And we all know that with the baby boomers coming of age, this population is going to continue to grow exponentially in the next 10 to 15 years. So this population is as diverse and as wide in their interests, in their needs, in the things they're looking for as the entire general population. So much of it depends upon whether or not they are experiencing disabilities through that aging process, or it depends upon where they have come from in the past. It depends on a really wide variety of things. But one of the things that we see right now is the extremely fast growth of the use of social networking by older people. In fact, I had someone say to me a couple of weeks ago, "Oh yes, my daughter says she doesn't want to be on Facebook anymore because it's full of old people." So we know that the older generation is now, they're certainly still one of the smallest populations, but they are also the fastest growing. And because of how it enables them to engage socially with other people, I'd like to just tell you real quickly a short story about a woman who took one of our computer classes, actually right here in Washington, D.C. She's from Nigeria, and she came to a second or third class and said to her instructor, and I quote, "I am now a popular woman. My relatives in Nigeria and London called me in shock, saying, 'What's going on? We saw you on Facebook.' I had never touched a computer before and never knew something like Facebook existed. The loneliness is gone. I can chat on the computer, and that is very good." Now, she's doing this on a computer, but from there, it's a fairly easy step to a mobile device, and she no longer has the fear to try those things. So I think that is one of the most important things that is happening, and the mobile piece of it makes it even easier for those people to connect.
Thank you, Peggy. I want to go to you, Kathy, and ask about application development and are there apps that have been particularly beneficial for individuals with cognitive disabilities? You began to talk a little bit about that, and I actually think this makes a kind of a nice follow-up to some of what Peggy was just saying. As our population ages, as the need for technologies to adapt to our changing needs, different ways of thinking, of needing to be reminded, et cetera. So I wonder if you might spend a few minutes talking about apps in the cognitive space and what's been developed that's been helpful, what's still needed.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's a very short answer in 7 minutes or less. I have to say, with the statements that Peggy just made, you could insert the word cognitive disability where she said aging, and we could basically give the same talk. One of the things, of course, that we know through our work is that for folks who are a little bit older, they don't have a disability, but they know somebody that does. And they certainly don't want to be lumped in with the group of, quote, people with cognitive disabilities. It's a fascinating world, and yet so much of this stuff just works brilliantly across both sides. And so it's quite fascinating. I could probably name 100 apps right now that may not be on the market tomorrow that are very useful for people with cognitive disabilities. But I want to talk a little bit about the access to those apps. And one of the things that we're watching very carefully, because as you may guess, people with cognitive disabilities, anytime the brain is involved, there might also be some other systems involved, like mobility, sensory, etc. And our friends in Toronto are working on something called the Tekla Shield. Has anyone heard of that yet? It's pretty fascinating. Basically, it's an open software and hardware tool, and it facilitates switch access to mobile devices. Okay? This is huge because, again, going back to my earlier statement, it can be the same for everything, and that's very important for our group. And the Tekla Shield allows you to access your iPhone, your iPad. You can use your adapted switches. You can use the driving controls on your wheelchair. Makes life a little simpler. And so any kind of app or any kind of approach that makes life simpler, I kind of like. The other type of thing that we're really seeing that's critically necessary is that for people with cognitive disabilities and access to mobile technology, their worlds are expanding just like everyone else's. That means they're getting out more in the community. They're doing more things online. The downside, if you have a cognitive disability, is you may or may not have a lot of ability to recognize danger or emergency, or when maybe you're giving out too much information. And so we've been looking at that pretty carefully. And one of the things, the other type of thing is if you have the transportation apps, you can get on a public transportation and go somewhere. That's really cool. But what if something out of the ordinary happens? And so we're watching what is going on in the emergency management arena. We're looking at things like medical bracelets that have, cloud-based access to medical information. There's a lot of really cool stuff like that we're watching very carefully.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Let me go to you, Christian. You mentioned the VRS app that has some challenges, having maybe less to do with the app and more to do with infrastructure. But talk for a second, if you could, about apps or features that have been particularly beneficial that you would want to comment on, and what development might still be needed to assist the community of people who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Okay. I would say that the most beneficial apps are related to the video calling. And specific mainstream apps such as FaceTime, Skype, and other applications such as those. For more and more deaf and hard of hearing people, they are using apps from mainstream population. And VRS really needs to support those mainstream app services. I would say that would be the biggest issue, and I'm looking for a new phone currently. I want it to be a 4G LTE phone because it's very smooth for video communication, but in this country I can't find one. There are a lot of very cool Android phones on the market that are LTE, but they are not supported by VRS companies. They can get the mainstream app support, but those apps don't communicate with VRS. So I am still waiting for an effective solution for that and have not yet found it. But that is my message to the VRS companies. Fix the infrastructure so that you can work with the mainstream applications and allow people to communicate. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that there is some interesting research in communication for hard of hearing people and how to support both audio and video. Right now, there is no app that really takes advantage of that. So if there's video matched with audio, sometimes that is better for lip reading if you can, say, read the audio. And it's about 100 to 250 milliseconds, so that's very interesting and kind of shocking as well. But that kind of information can be used for unique apps that can help improve communication, specifically for hard of hearing people who are depending on lip reading.
Thank you. John, let me, you touched on this a little bit too in your comments about how important mobile technology and apps have been for people who are blind or visually impaired. Do you want to single out a couple of areas where development has been particularly valuable and point to some areas where development would be helpful?
Sure. Is my mic on? Oh, there we go. So one area where development has been really helpful is the screen reader itself and the accessibility, the underlying accessibility itself. Because as Christian has pointed out, while we do have some applications like money identifiers and interactive GPS that allows us to explore and things like that, blind people use normal applications too, email, text messaging, Skype now on the iPhone and Android, and we need access to those types of things. So a good accessibility framework and the screen readers themselves are very, very important. In terms of where I think maybe development should go, or maybe what might be a little bit helpful, is I think maybe it would be kind of nice. There are some certain apps right now that you can take pictures of things and it will tell you what you've taken a picture of. But it's not necessarily real time. So you can't just kind of use a camera to get an overall feel of your environment. You can take pictures of individual things and ask specific questions. But it's not real time. Also, as far as I know, with this particular app, there's no barcode functionality in it. So if you have a barcode thing, you have to use a different app. If you want to identify money, you have to use a different app. If you want to identify color, you have to use a different app. It would be kind of cool. It's not a necessity by any means, but it would be kind of cool if there was like a one-stop shop where you could do all of that in one application. You could sort of get the barcodes for something, you could have it identify colors, and it could maybe tell you what the object was in real time. That would be pretty neat. But again, it's not absolutely essential, but that would be pretty cool, I think.
Thanks, John. Ari, you kind of launched us into this conversation about apps and their benefits. Are there some areas of development that people with autism, in your view, would in your interactions with individuals, that would be particularly relevant, beneficial to have that's not currently available?
A couple of things. First, is my mic? Okay, Here we go. All right. First, one thing that we've noticed as we've tried to represent what, again, is a very diverse community is that we have a great many autistic people who communicate better via text and typing, and then also a great many autistic people and people with other developmental disabilities, particularly intellectual disabilities, who do not have great typing skills or great experience using computers or technology in general. And this has mainly been an issue when we've tried to hold meetings, for example, between ASAN, which is an organization primarily of autistic adults, and, for example, Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, which is an organization that is more heavily people with intellectual disabilities. And all of ASAN's meetings are typically held through one chat applet or another, unless we're meeting in person. And all of SABE's meetings, unless they're meeting in person, are typically held through conference calls. And both of these things are done for accessibility purposes. And so when we have joint meetings or work on joint projects, the challenge that we often run into is how do we build an effective mechanism utilizing that still lets us use standard chat applets to have meetings and conversations where some of the people are going to be typing and wanting to read information. There are a great many people in our community with auditory processing issues, so just having the voice going simultaneously isn't going to work. And then there are also going to be a great many people who are going to be speaking and are going to want to be hearing information. And having a way to communicate both modes of information and both modes of communication simultaneously is going to be very important. I'd also like to, Paul, very briefly speak to what I would say is a concern we have with the direction of some app development in the autism and developmental disability space. The question of danger was mentioned earlier. And that's something we've been looking at very closely, and we've also been looking at the responses that have emerged to that question very closely. I think this morning, Facebook, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal about Facebook considering creating a special service under parental supervision for children under the age of 13, where a child's online activities would be monitored by a parent. Well, very often people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autism, are treated as children by society. And, we've seen actually a few instances in which app developers have talked about creating autism-friendly social networking devices or social networking interfaces in which parents or guardians or service providers would have the ability to sort of look over the shoulder of people with developmental disabilities interacting online. That's something we're very concerned about from a privacy standpoint. Actually, one of the real reasons why online technologies, including mobile technology, are of such great interest to autistic people and people with other developmental disabilities is that it's an opportunity to escape the environment of paternalism that we often have in interacting with the service provision system. I remember I received one Facebook message a while back from a young woman who was under guardianship. So this is somebody who a court has ruled is incompetent to handle their own affairs. And, again, these restrictive methods are often used for people who are not under guardianship as well. And she was communicating how she didn't want to be under guardianship, and she felt that the guardianship was an abusive form of guardianship. But because her mother was a very prominent person in the local autism society, there was nobody in the offline world that she could communicate with about that wouldn't go and report that information directly to her parents, who were her guardian. So the ability of digital technologies, including mobile technologies, to be free of unreasonable supervision or intrusion on the part of service providers, family members, and guardians is something that's very important for autistic adults and others with developmental disabilities, and something we hope to see safeguarded.
Thank you, Ari. Here's what we're going to do. I think we can take Q&A, and while I want people to think about that for a second, I want my panelists to think about the following while hopefully somebody comes up here and tells me how we can do Q&A. I'm going to start with you, Kathy, and I'd like to work through just going in order from Kathy to John to Peggy to Christian to Ari. Name a couple of resources that you would suggest people go to find out about apps and tech. It's come up a couple of times, I think, in everybody's commentary about the difficulty of finding the information that's needed. So I would love it if you would share with us a couple of resources that you would suggest that people look to for information about mobile tech and apps in the communities that you work with. And then meanwhile, if someone could let me know how we can do Q&A for a couple of minutes here, we'll do that. I've got plenty of things to follow up on if you all are bashful about asking questions. So Kathy, we'll start with you, a couple of resources, and just work across the panel. Remember to raise your hand to cue the mic.
Okay, am I on? Thank you. Well, hopefully, we launched in 2009, we launched a product usability testing lab through our Cognitive Technologies RERC. And so hopefully within the next 3 months, we're going to begin posting consumer information around accessibility of any number of apps as well as technologies. And we hope to build on that in the coming years. From the cognitive perspective, it's pretty tricky finding anything that's really completely usable with this information, and so we'd like to see more of that happening and more things available for our user groups.
Am I on? Yeah, okay. So there are several different hubs of information for blind and visually impaired people to go about cell phones. One of them is called Accessible Android. It's a blog where people share their experiences with certain Android phones and what works and what doesn't. There's also something out there now called Apple Viz, which is applevis.com. That one talks about the iPhone, and they talk about and discuss accessible applications, as well as what is the most popular, and you can sort by a lot of different categories and things. There's also some websites where you can get podcasts. One of them is called Blind Cool Tech, blindcooltech.com, and there they have access to podcasts about the iPhone, the Android phones, and even some Nokia products that may still be on the market. There are other resources out there, but those I think have been the most helpful. Thank you.
Again, we look at resources as being a very broad spectrum of apps and websites and things like that because of the population that we deal with. On our own website, which is www.oasisnet.org, we try to continually change and update and keep links to important resources for people over the age of 50. We are also in the process of working on an online community that will help people find the resources they need, again, in this particular population. Beyond that, we do know that those older adults who do have access and who do go online regularly are basically looking for three different things. They're looking for government information. They are looking for, I think it was three. They're looking for government information, and they are also looking for health information, and beyond that, they're looking for social engagement. So finding the resources in those areas, of course, they're quite broad, and we try to maintain those that are most useful for people.
So this is Christian. First, we do have our own webpage, taps.gallaudet.edu, taps.gallaudet.edu, and there's a variety of technology information specifically related to mobile phones. CTIA also has a website, accesswireless.org, and there's a lot of information about picking the appropriate phone for hard of hearing people. Another is deaf and hard of hearing consumer advocates organizations, NAD, HLAA, and the like, all have websites that have very good information. But you also have to follow each other's media, because deaf and hard of hearing people love to chat with each other through social media, and so you can find a lot of information on social media websites as well.
There isn't a broad centralized resource regarding autism and mobile computing, in part because so many of the access needs that our community has are very similar to the needs that other communities have. At the same time, there's also a really vibrant autistic social media community, both on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other resources. And we're currently in the process of building a new website entitled the Loud Hands Project. It's going to be designed to amplify autistic voices both online and in the broader community, and it's going to have a fairly heavy social media component that will be interacting with mobile computing. At the moment, though, most of our interactions with broader community resources also exist within the general disability community.
Thank you very much. What I would say, we probably have time for two questions, and if anyone with a question could raise your hand. Mikhail tells me we'll be able to get you a microphone. Give your name, organization, quick question. And I would also, I don't know if anyone mentioned, the Federal Communications Commission itself has established and is charged with establishing a clearinghouse on telecommunications technologies under the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. So that's another resource if that didn't come up. And I know Access Wireless did come up as a clearinghouse resource. Is there a question in the audience?
Said it all.
There's one.
I don't know that. Okay.
I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Simon Horn. I'm in the Australian delegation to the ITU, Study Group 16, and I was asked to attend this meeting because I'm a programmer, I'm a developer, and I develop apps for iPhone, iPad. And so this has been a very enlightening presentation. So, and Christian, we had a long discussion, and I think we are on agreement in a lot of that areas. And I think that after we have discussion, we'll talk a bit more. So basically, some of the questions I noticed from a programmer's point of view, they seem to overlap. There's a lot of, for instance, I do a lot of work with aged care in Australia. We're doing an app for aged care, for video conferencing for aged care. And it's very similar to an app that I'm developing for video relay services. I mean, it's very similar. The back end is very different, but the app to the customer is very similar. So what I can see a lot of overlapping going on. And I think there's some similarities that can be done across for general disabilities. So that was very enlightening because, I sat here and went, oh, that's very similar to, so yes, that's all basically.
Thank you very much for that. Is there another question in the audience? Okay.
Hi, I'm Mary Bruner, and I have a question. First of all, I'd like to compliment the panel. This was very, very thoughtful and lots of information. Secondly, I'd like to ask Ari a question. There was several months ago a blog article in the New York Times discussing apps for autistic persons who have autism. And I wondered if you saw it. It was in the sort of Tuesday technology trends section. I'm wondering if you saw it and how you would view that type of media and for your community. Is it helpful, or is it more helpful for just general readers?
It's a very interesting question. Do we have the? Okay, now we do. Okay, great. It's a very interesting question. I vaguely recall that article. I don't recall the specifics, so I'll kind of address myself to that style of coverage in general. I think it kind of depends on what it's discussing. For example, it's incredibly important that we get more coverage of the amazing innovations and utility that augmentative communication technology apps have for autistic people and for other people with disabilities who have communication-related challenges. The fact, again, that you can get the state or a school district to pay for a $16,000 Dynavox but not a vastly more functional $500 iPad is bizarre, and it's something that the more the general public understands and hears about, hopefully we can start to shift policy, as has already begun to happen in a number of states. I think sometimes when you get other types of coverage, it's less helpful. For example, I think about a year and a half ago, an Australian autism nonprofit, decided they would hold a fundraiser called Communications Shutdown. And what it was they sold for, I think, $10 a piece. This was the fundraiser component. Apps that would shut down the user's ability to use Facebook and Twitter for a 24-hour period on this pre-agreed day, and this was supposed to simulate the silence and isolation of being autistic, which was something our community found incredibly offensive, as is unfortunately often the case with things done by autism nonprofits that do not have autistic people involved with them. And we'd actually, as a response, we started something called Autistic Speaking Day, which is now an annual autistic community event in which those of us on the spectrum use Facebook, Twitter, and other social media as much as possible to talk about our experiences and priorities. So I think a big part of the answer to that question is to what degree is the coverage talking about something that's actually useful and relevant and a priority for the self-advocate community, or to what degree is the coverage just, oh my God, autistic people may be using social media too, just like regular people. So,
thank you, Ari. I want to first of all thank the panelists. We have a question online, and then we'll be break, I'm told.
Okay, the question online states, I am blind, and I am graduating this week with a master's in management from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and my research focused on managing and implementing accessibility initiatives within a technology development enterprise. My question relates to the elephant in this room. A notably important stakeholder is missing in today's discussions are the developer and the designer communities who are making the technologies of mobile apps. What is being done by the non-corporate bodies to have better informed developers in schools and corporations for training and awareness of accessibility? The question was submitted by Sanish Gupta.
Thank you. This excellent question. I suspect that there may be some others better placed later to tackle some of that conversation. This panel was intended to be a user community group speaking to apps and technologies. And actually, I think one of the interesting points that came out of this was the absolute importance of having collaboration between the disability community and developers in working together on apps, both apps that are targeted to mainstream as well as apps that are targeted to meet specific needs. I do hope that point might come up in other panels as well in terms of ways in which educating developer and particularly those who are in corporate communities can be addressed. I suspect all of our organizations are doing pieces of that. I'm just going to quickly touch on a couple other topics that I know came out of this discussion that I hope will get tackled as we move along. Cost and capacity of the networks and of the technologies themselves. the technology devices, this is closely related, the mobile tech devices that replace assistive technology, and the woodwork effect that I think Ari and others touched on so effectively, that even though it's a huge cost savings, they're not being made available. Related to that, then, are the models of funding and provision of technology. Training and information came up a lot, and I think that related to that is the need for resources. While centralization isn't really always as good an idea as it might have been at one time, certainly there is a need to ensure that there is information and resources available to individuals with disabilities to find out about apps and technology. The digital literacy as an activity of daily living I've written down as kind of a key point that I think we need to start thinking about all across our communities. Let me ask you to please join me in thanking our panelists, Kathy Bodine, John Herzog, Peggy Remus, Christian Vogler, and Ari Naiman. Thanks so much, everybody.
Hi, if everyone could take their seats, please. We'd like to start the next session. Thank you.
Well, we'll keep going with our briefing this morning with a panel on the latest technology enablers for assistive and accessible mobile apps. And by technology enablers, we mean those new blocks of innovation that actually make mobile devices and mobile services much more effective for persons with disabilities. So today, I would like to introduce the moderator of our panel, who is Matt Gerst, Counsel, External and State Affairs at CTIA, the Wireless Association. Matt Gerst advises CTIA and its member companies on federal and state policy issues affecting mobile wireless services and equipment, including accessibility for persons with disabilities, mobile content, numbering, and 911 emergency communications. By convening a group of accessibility community and industry representatives, Matt designed, in fact, and managed the development of accesswireless.org, which is really a very innovative and very positive development on the part of industry. And accesswireless.org was recognized, in fact, as one of the FCC's first Chairman's Awards for their advancement in accessibility. Matt also represents CTIA on the Federal Communications Commission's Emergency Access Advisory Committee and North American Numbering Council. Matt is a graduate of Ohio University and received his JD from New York Law School. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Axel. So first, I'd like to start by saying thank you very much to the G3ICT for inviting me here to the M-Enabling Summit, to the M-Enabling briefing. I previously spoke at the M-Enabling Summit last December, and it really was an incredible event. So this is a welcome next step, I think, in their efforts. We have a great panel for you today. Today we're going to be talking about the latest technology enablers for assistive and accessible mobile communications and applications. I think we had a great few panels previously giving a general overview of where the wireless industry has come, where we're going, and some of the user needs and things that are expected of the industry, and these incredible mobile applications that we're seeing coming to the market. And one of the things that I'd like to mention before we get into our great panel that we have lined up for you was there was a little bit of discussion about in the previous panels that I've heard about how much choice there is and how many devices there are in the market, how many applications there are, how difficult it is to sort of find these things just because of the sheer overwhelming amount of diversity in the market. So as has been mentioned, there's been a number of different initiatives, both industry-driven, consumer-driven, government-driven, to try to get the message out. And I think Paul made a great point about improving digital literacy. And particularly in this community, it's going to be even more imperative. And as it's been mentioned, CTIA has developed a website, accesswireless.org. I did want to mention a few things about it because I think it's very relevant, not only to this topic, this panel, but the previous panel. We have three big, I think, innovations that are ingrained in accesswireless.org. One is a find a phone function. And and we've teamed up with the Mobile Manufacturer Forum's Global Accessibility Reporting Initiative, and you can now search for devices that are included in the GARI system based on their accessibility features, and this is the first time that this had been brought to the United States. The second is that a few years ago we had teamed up with the Wireless RERC at Georgia Tech, Gallaudet University, and a few other CTI member companies to develop a video series to train persons who use hearing aids and how to locate and identify hearing aid-compatible devices. And I think this has been a tremendous innovation. I've heard from a lot of people about how useful these services, this video series has been. And finally, one of the things that we've tried to do is we've heard is that, well, I know that the industry has resources on accessibility, but I can't find them. So we have direct links to all of our member companies' accessibility web pages. So if you go to accesswireless.org, you easily be able to navigate to any of the carrier or handset manufacturers' accessibility websites to get information on the products and services that they're providing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this is not a set it and forget it website for the industry. This is something that we want to continue to improve upon, and hopefully through partnerships with not only government and other industry representatives, but particularly consumer representatives, we can do that. So we're always open to adding new links, cross-promoting websites, and also improving upon the content that's already there. We try to keep it updated, but as we've also heard, the industry has been changing so quickly, it's even hard for us to keep up. So with that, I think we can lead right into the panel. To my far left, we have Amanda Stent from AT&T Research. She's the principal member of the technical staff. She's going to be discussing cloud computing. To her right, we have Ann Taylor, who is the Director of Access Technology at the National Federation of the Blind, who will be discussing near-field communication innovations for persons with disabilities. And to my immediate left is someone who probably needs no introduction, Karen Peltz-Strauss, who's the Deputy Chief of the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau at the FCC, who will be talking a little bit about some of the new programs and technologies and innovations that the FCC is focused on to improve accessibility in the mobile space. So with that, why don't we start with you, Amanda?
It's really great to be here. I speak as a technology developer. My job at AT&T is partly to go around and motivate other researchers to apply what they're doing to technology. One of the things that we work on at AT&T is speech in the cloud and video processing in the cloud. And these are just two examples of new kinds of technology enabler where the network becomes more and more intelligent and has more and more services in it that can be used to create, among other things, accessible applications. In particular, we have the speech mashup, which is a text-to-speech and speech recognition in the cloud, and it's freely available for use by nonprofits. And we love to partner with people who understand the needs of the disabilities communities and who have technological solutions that they want to develop where we can bring speech to the table to help them develop those solutions. So that's just one example of how the cloud can be used to partner developers and people from the disabilities communities to create improved assistive technologies.
Great. Thank you.
Yes. I think he's asking for the microphone.
Okay. Thank you very much, Amanda. Next, Ann Taylor, if you could briefly talk a little bit about near-field communications and how they're improving or expected to improve the lives of persons with disabilities.
Good morning. My name is Ann Taylor. I'm the Director of Access Technology at the National Federation of the Blind, Jernigan Institute. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to talk about near-field communication technology, also known as NFC. I want to clearly state early in my presentation, can you hear me? I'm pretty loud. Okay. I want to clearly state early in my presentation that I will be talking about the accessibility features of near-field communication technology devices. Those features are most relevant to the blind consumer and consumer who are print disabled. We are very excited to be here today because we realize the potential applications of near-field communication technology, and we'd like to be able to begin I believe, what's going to be a very extremely constructive dialogue with the stakeholders, key industry players, to bring about the accessibility of near-field communication technology and enable devices for the blind. First, let's have a look at how near-field communication technology would work. I have 7 minutes, so let's see if I can do this. Near-field communication technology is a short-range, new wireless standard technology, and this technology works best if you have enabled NFC devices within range between 4 centimeter to 0.2 meter. And the range, if you notice, of the connectivity, the range is very much shorter than the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi range that we're currently familiar with. There are several benefits to this design, having a shorter communication range. The first one is security. I would like to underline 3 of them because of the time constraint today. The first one is having to do with security. If you are conducting a payment transaction using NFC technology and you have somebody who wants to eavesdrop on your signal to try to pry your important data like your credit card numbers and so on and so forth, they gotta be awfully close to you. And having said that, you probably will notice them. So it's fairly secure. The second benefit is the benefit that is really near and dear to my heart. I, like many of you, travel across this country, spend countless hours in airports and bus terminals, waiting to get on some sort of vehicle or plane. And then what you have here is I have a iPhone devices, which is Bluetooth, and I'm trying to connect it to my Bluetooth braille display in an extremely congested area with many gazillion Bluetooth devices. Well, with this near-field communication, because it has a shorter range, you will automatically have less interference, which this feature is absolutely, I know I would love it. So the third one is really quite amazing feature for near-field communication. This technology is designed to establish a connection and exchange information in 0.01 second. I personally have not seen that work. But however, I'm so looking forward to it. I can imagine that if the technology implemented correctly will work this way, and think about all the productivity increase in productivity that we can have with this technology. The NFC Technology Forum is a really good resource for you to go to and learn all about this near-field communication technology. The forum is a non-profit organization of over 160 companies who get together to harmonize the standard to make sure that NFC technology has interoperability, which is absolutely fantastic. Here's what the forums say about NFC technology. NFC technology make life easier and more convenient for consumer around the world by making it simpler to make transaction, exchange digital content, and connect electronic devices with a touch. The forum also state that the standard-based connectivity technology NFC harmonizes today's diverse contactless technology, enabling current and future solutions in areas such as access control, consumer electronic, healthcare, information collection and exchange, loyal coupon payment, and transport. I can think of all kinds of ways, judging by those definition, that I as a blind person can use this technology. I hopefully will be able to use one day an NFC-enabled smartphone to gain access to airline kiosks, perhaps. I should be able to perhaps use the NFC-enabled devices, if they are accessible, to access consumer electronic appliance at home, where I currently don't have access to them right now, especially the high-end one. The forum further state that this technology is supported by the world-leading communication device manufacturers, semiconductor producers, network operators, IT and services company, and financial services organization. NFC is compatible with hundreds of million contactless cards and cards reader deployed globally. Now, with that kind of stat, you kind of wonder, at least I wonder, where in the world do you find this NFC certified businesses? Well, we should look at the most successful usage of NFC technology currently being harnessed right now, which is Google. Google has launched, I should say, Google Wallet. And there are a handful of phones that are currently available that can support NFC technology. And there are phones like Samsung Galaxy Nexus and Google Nexus S 4G, and more phones ready, NFC-ready phones will be arriving later on this year, including the BlackBerry Bold 9790, phones that run on Microsoft Windows Phone 7, Windows Mobile Phone 7 will also, and Windows 8 actually, will be compatible with NFC as well. Let's pause and have a look at this list of devices. You may notice that not every device has adequate accessibility features for the blind to be able to use the phone. Microsoft currently still developing accessibility features for their Windows Mobile Phone. RIM just recently launched the screen access software for BlackBerry, but who knows whether the BlackBerry Bold 9790 phone will be accessible or not. I think we can come together by urging one another to make sure that this device is accessible to the blind. Cell service provider, please urge manufacturer that if they're going to make NFC enabled devices, they should provide accessibility out of the box. Same with device manufacturers. You know, I have to say this, but Apple has set the bar awfully high. We as a community would like to see comparable accessibility or even surpass what Apple and Google has been able to do. Now let me turn attention to Google Wallet for just a moment. Google Wallet on the Google Nexus 4G running on Sprint network is compatible with NFC, and this is compatible with the MasterCard Pay Pass system. According to online resources that I've read, consensus is that there are about 140,000 merchants in the U.S. that accept this payment method. I'm told to wrap it up, so I'm trying to wrap it up. So I want to know where they are, and the key thing is, how do we find this business as blind person? Do businesses and sales carrier deploy marketing materials in such a way that is as equally accessible to the blind as to the sighted population? I just want to end by saying this. I believe NFC technology has tremendous potential. Its potential, though, need to go beyond mobile payment, and we can talk more about how NFC technology can be used to gain access to transportation and other applications. But we believe in this technology. We believe that as industry comes together, working together with consumers, we can find accessible way so that the blind will not be left behind.
Great, thank you, Anne. And now to discuss a little bit about the FCC's activities, Karen.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do today is just give you a brief overview and an update of some of the things that we've been doing and are about to do here at the Commission to again help motivate, incentivize, and implement some of the accessibility goals that we all have. The first program that we're going to be getting up and running this summer is one that I think many of us are incredibly excited about. It's the National Deafblind Equipment Distribution Program. The CBAA, as you know, allowed us to use up to $10 million per year from the federal, or rather the Telecommunications Relay Services Fund to distribute equipment to low-income people who are deaf and blind. And last April, we issued a final rule on this, setting up a pilot program that would last for 2 to 3 years initially, although this is an ongoing program. It's not going to end after that time. We are just experimenting with how we want to implement it. So that is going to start, as I say, this summer. We are in the process of finalizing the selection of a number of entities. Specifically, we are choosing one entity, local entity, per state to operate this equipment distribution program for the individual states. Each state gets a minimum of $50,000 plus an additional amount of funding based on the size of their population. We will be announcing all of this fairly soon, within a few weeks. And we have also set aside $500,000. Again, that's $500,000 for each of the years of the pilot program for a national outreach effort to make sure that the word truly does get out. The reason that this program is so exciting to us is that we do think that this is a population that has been left behind, as many of the other technologies have been able to fill some of the gaps for people who are blind or deaf, or have cognitive disabilities, mobility disabilities. This community has still been very reliant on some very highly specialized equipment that is very expensive. The nice thing, however, about some of the newer apps that are coming out, including some of the tablets, is that it's not always, quote, assistive technology anymore. There's now mainstream technology that's making this bringing this population into the mainstream, and we made very certain in our rules to make clear that this program doesn't only cover assistive technology, it covers mainstream technology as well. We are going to have a website up. I believe that the National Outreach Coordinator will also have a website where you can get more information. Just one more point that I want to mention, because a lot of people have asked us about this, in terms of who is deafblind, who is defined as deafblind. That's a definition that's given in the Act. So we had very little wiggle room on that. It basically mirrors, our regulations mirror the definition given in the Helle-Keller National Center Act. It requires a certain level of vision and hearing loss that combined cause extreme difficulty in attaining independence in daily life activities, achieving psychosocial adjustment, or obtaining a vocation. So that pretty much wraps up the summary for that act, and again, or this regulation rather. We are just overjoyed that we're going to be on time. We don't have an exact date, but we're very close to launching, and we were ecstatic to get applications from every single state, so that there will be no gaps in this program. The second law or set of rules that I want to mention to you, we adopted in January, so that's after the last M-Enabling Summit, and that's captioning of Internet-based video programming. Our new rules cover full-length programming. They don't cover video clips and outtakes, and what they focus on is only video programming shown on television with captions. After the programming is shown on television with captions, when it moves over to the Internet, is streamed over the Internet for audiences everywhere, it must still contain those captions. Very, very important as equipment merges and the devices that people use merge, and more people are relying on the Internet. So this does not cover consumer-generated media, the YouTube-type videos, and it doesn't cover movies shown on the Internet unless they've been shown on TV with captions. Just want to make that clear. The implementation deadlines for this are nearly upon us. Again, very exciting. September 30th, just a few months from now, all pre-recorded video programming that is not edited for the internet. And when we say edited, we're really talking about some substantial editing. We're not talking about editing for changing the number of commercials. We're really talking about substantially changing the program. All such pre-recorded programming must be captioned on the internet if it's shown on TV with captions on or after September 30th, 2012, only a few months from now. 6 months later, the rules go into effect for live and near-live video programming. Near-live pertains to programming that's performed and recorded less than 24 hours before being shown on TV for the first time, and that's often your late-night shows. And finally, 6 months later, September 30th, 2013, pre-recorded programming that is substantially edited when it goes to the internet must also contain captions if it's shown on or after September 30th, 2013. There's a separate category of rules for something called archival internet video programming. This is programming that's already somewhere on websites on the internet. It's given a little bit of extra time because of the difficulty in finding that programming and then possibly reformatting it. So that programming has until March 30th, 2014. And basically after that, there's 45 days for any programming shown on television after that date. If it's already been someplace on the internet, it has to be captioned on that original programming library site within 45 days after being shown on TV. However, that 45-day period goes down increasingly over the next year to 30 days after March 30th. 2015, actually the next couple years, and then to 15 days after March 30th, 2016. And I know that those dates are kind of complicated. We're putting together a fact sheet. We'll have that up on our website, and you can review the rules there. The reason I know that I'm terribly over. Okay. So the reason I tell other people to stop talking, and then I keep talking. The reason that this is all important is because mobile devices now enable captioning, and our rules also require television sets with screens under 13 inches now, if it's readily achievable, if it's technically achievable, to also be able to pass through captions. That's a change from existing law, which, as you know, only covered televisions, only required decoder captioning capability in televisions with screens over 13 inches. Those rules are also going into effect January 1st, 2014. I'm not going to go into the advanced communication services rules. They're too long. They're too complicated, other than to just mention that they are going into effect on October of 2013, and we are still putting together the final rules on internet browsers on mobile devices, and hope to have some rules issued in the coming year. Finally, I do want to mention, actually, you know what, I'll hold my last thought for the end of the day, because they're bringing me back. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. So I think at this point we're going to move into questions that we've prepared, and then we'll leave a few minutes for questions from the audience, unless anyone has a burning question they want to ask right now. Okay. So, you know, one of the things I think that Karen's describing is that the Commission's been very active on accessibility issues over the last few years. But the implementation and adoption of these rules, I think, and their effect on the industry is yet to be seen, just because they're so new, they've just been adopted. So I want to start with you, Amanda. What changes really have you seen in the mobile marketplace with respect to accessibility just in the last few years alone?
First of all, the iPhone was, in fact, a real game changer. As Anne said, I totally agree, in terms of accessibility and in terms of the kinds of technology that mobile devices have. I mean, when you think about it, 5 years ago, none of you were checking your email on your phones unless you had a BlackBerry. I mean, it's incredible the changes that we've had. Now you can watch live streaming video on your phones. Now, obviously, this has implications for the telecommunications providers in terms of congestion on the network, but it also offers tremendous promise in terms of increasing the range and types of thing that you can do. Now, one of the big advances has been HTML5, which is the next generation programming language for the web, including the mobile web. And so you will start to see more and more media-rich websites that are also accessible. At least we hope they will also be accessible. The potential, the technical potential is there. The content providers will have to fulfill the technical potential. The other thing that users will start to see, and already start to see, is more and more things moving off the web browser and into applications that you download. And this can be good. It has so far been pretty bad, in my opinion, for people with disabilities, because while the website may be somewhat accessible, the app will typically not be accessible. But with the standards that are coming out and the ways that we can now mark up applications for the web and for mobile devices, those may start to be accessible as well. And all of this is built on and based on the cloud, which provides more services and enabling technologies such as speech and video processing. For example, now if you have a picture and you want to know where it comes from or similar pictures, you can just load it up and you'll see all the similar pictures and the place in the world where it is, and you can map it and you can see reviews of it. All these kinds of services, these mash-ups as we call them, are starting to really change the game in terms of the kinds of technology and the kinds of content that we can serve to users and the different ways in which we can serve them to make them accessible.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here. So why do you think applications have been so successful to this point in improving accessibility on mobile handsets? And does an application have to be focused on accessibility to provide a benefit to the accessibility community?
Thank you, Matt. The application of mobile technology has been absolutely great, and various OS on a mobile platform such as iOS and Android have provided reasonably good applications design criteria. And I do believe that if the app developers design their applications according to the accessibility design criteria, then not only people who have disability will benefit from it, but I think it would make it more aesthetically pleasing for sighted individuals, and will make it easier to use. So for me, having been using a mobile device like the iPhone, that's totally have changed. I don't need to go into any more how it has just been a game changer for me, and as I'm sure it's true with others here as well. And this is a very, very welcome change for us. So app developers certainly do need to follow accessibility criteria design, and we users, I do believe that we need to be engaged and involved in supplying recommendations to app developers to make sure to let them know when they're doing things right and when they're not doing things right. So,
thank you. Amanda, did you want to chime in?
I absolutely agree with what Anne says. Speaking as a technologist, we are solutions in search of problems, and if we're not given guidance, we will go off down a rabbit trail and produce something very complicated and fancy that we love, but no one can use. It's truth. It really is. So we need the people in the communities, including people with mobility-related disabilities, people with vision impairment, people with hearing loss, to really come along and tell us what we can do. And I'll just give one example. There's a website called hackingautism.org, and people who are caregivers or people with autism go there and post ideas about technological solutions that they would like. And some of these are incredibly simple to produce technologically, but the people who are posing the ideas don't have the technological skills to produce them, and we as technologists would never think to try to implement those because they are so technologically simple. So this is the kind of partnership where people come to technologists with their problems, and technologists design solutions in collaboration with the target user population that can be really beneficial for both sides.
That's a great point. Something else I thought I'd point out to the audience is that a number of the service providers are actually packaging accessibility applications together for certain operating systems and providing them so that they make sure that there's some sort of easy to access and easy to find way to address and sort of recognizing the way that accessibility is sort of changing and applications are changing the game in accessibility. And Karen, I wanted to ask you, there are so many changes in the market that are occurring. Ann was talking about near-field communications. Amanda's talking about HTML5. How does the Commission ensure that the rules stay current and reflect, the flexibility that's needed in the market to address these issues?
It's definitely a challenge. Is this on? Yes. There's no question that it takes a lot of diligence, but we meet with the industry on a regular basis. It's as you know, since you've been in here a number of times, and make sure that we keep abreast of all of the various upcoming technologies. We attend the trade shows and do all the reading that we need to do to keep up with what's going on. We do have a report that's due to Congress every 2 years on the state of technology for people with disabilities, and we'll be releasing a request for comments on what we should be putting into that report fairly soon. So that's going to also help us, and we really do encourage all of you who have some input in that to help us this first round. This initial round is going to be a little different than future rounds because the rules have not all gone into effect yet. But just we want to get a snapshot of what is accessible out there. We think that there have been significant changes since the Act has been passed, even though the rules haven't gone into effect. The other thing that we do is work with the Access Board. I mentioned that there are a few people here from the Access Board, and they're working still on guidelines for Section 508 and Section 255. And those guidelines are ultimately going to be used by the Commission for our performance standards. And they also have regular meetings with the industry and with consumers and keep abreast of all the new technologies.
One of the things I think is interesting about where the Commission's role is sort of changing in this area, at least from what we've seen, is you're talking about a $500,000 education program for deafblind equipment, and you talk about the fact that the FCC has a clearinghouse to promote and address accessibility. So it's even as if the Commission's moving from a watching over the industry to sort of promoting how these technologies can be used in improving lives of persons with disabilities.
So that's a perfect segue for the point that I did not mention, which is that we also recently launched, and that's exactly right, and let me just add that what you're talking about in part is also our Accessibility and Innovation Initiative that has as one of its goals a ongoing dialogue and a public and private partnerships with respect to trying to achieve change. And they're not always regulations. There's a lot of effort at collaboration, coordination, consultation. And just recently, toward that end, on May 23rd, we released a public notice seeking nominations for the second annual Chairman's Accessibility Awards for Advancement in Accessibility, which, as you know, Matt, CTIA won one of those awards last year for its CTIA Accessibility Wireless Apps Clearinghouse, which we then piggybacked on for our clearinghouse. So your website was very instrumental in helping us get our clearinghouse up and started. In the coming year, which will be the nominations we're looking for can be submitted between May 31st and July 31st of this year for any technologies or practices introduced to the public between July 31st, 2011 and July 31st, 2012. It's a little bit different this year. We're looking for nominations in specific categories, including education, deafblind solutions, video programming device solutions, geolocation solutions, mobile apps, and consumer empowerment, information, and civic participation solutions. So actually, it's a very wide area, and we're really hoping to get a lot of great nominations. And we think that these incentivize entities to come forward with their innovations.
Thank you. Well, I know we got started a little late, so in order to keep the trains on time, why don't we move to any audience questions? No questions at all. Oh, there's one. Okay.
Thanks so much. This is so exciting, all the work that's being done. I'm wondering if you could address some of the issues that you raised and all the new wonderful rules, how you see this interfacing on an international basis. Having just been in Ethiopia, where everyone's carrying their mobile phone, and meeting with the leaders of deaf NGOs and DPOs, unfortunately, the connectivity and the cost and so on is so prohibitive, and this is what they're looking towards. So when you're seeking input in terms of all of this exciting new development and the regs that we have the wonderful leadership to develop here in the U.S., what are your thoughts on the international aspects?
Okay, so one of the international areas that we focused on is harmonization, which the Access Board, again, with its guidelines, has made first and foremost, harmonization and standardization. So that's occurring with respect to specific attributes that mobile devices need to have, and again, they're kind of the leaders in that. But you're witnessing, Evie, the international effort. This is it. I mean, this is the launch, and the goal, Axel and Francesca and ITU and G3 ICT has been more active than ever before in trying to educate, promote, incentivize, motivate other countries to come up to speed. And we realize there are financial limitations and barriers that some other countries may have. For example, we are lucky enough to have the only completely unrestricted video relay service in the world. There are around 6 or 7 or 8 other video relay services. Every other one limits the number of hours that people can talk, or the number of calls that they can make, or imposes other kinds of limitations. So we're lucky here, but we feel that this is really, like I said, this is the launching pad. I don't know if you want to add anything, Axel, but this is the goal. This is what we're doing to bring it internationally.
Amanda?
I think the potential for internationalization here is absolutely phenomenal. There are some areas in which European countries in particular meet or exceed what we do, particularly with respect to TV programming access. Although with the CVAA now we will be coming up to some of those standards. So there's also many ways in which countries like Ethiopia, China, India, Afghanistan don't have to maintain the legacy telecommunications networks that we do in this country. So there's advantages and disadvantages to being Ethiopia or Nigeria of the world.
Just to piggyback onto that, I neglected to mention when I talked about new programs that our video description rules will be going into effect also this July. So it's going to be a very, very busy year, and that is the one area in which we are a little behind some of the European countries.
Absolutely, Ann.
So the people internationally are actually watching the progress that's happening in the U.S. in both regulatory front as well as the private sector. And the fact that FCC passed the 21st Century Telecommunication Video Accessibility Act is absolutely huge. It's huge because it now requires manufacturers to take a serious look at accessibility to make sure that their devices are accessible. And when you provide accessibility out of the box, you automatically bring down the cost, thus make it more easier and affordable for many consumers internationally, especially in the developing countries like Ethiopia. So, thank you, FCC, for doing this. And, we are all working hard. And what I believe, having been able to accomplish in the U.S. will send a good momentum around the world for accessibility.
Thank you, Ann. That's great. The only other thing I think I want to mention is that, particularly for CTIA's handset manufacturer members, a lot of these are global companies. So as Karen mentioned, global harmonization is a very important piece of some of their compliance and ensuring that they're meeting their accessibility obligations and ensuring that they can provide accessibility solutions that not only work here in the U.S. but in other places around the world. And hopefully that's something that's occurring through some of the leadership that's going on in this country, and also through efforts to work with other countries, particularly through this organization. Any other questions? Over there.
Hi, my question is directed to Amanda. It's a foundational question. I'm a bit of a novice about apps. The first panel, someone mentioned that you could download an app and then if you could find it again. My question is this: when you download an app onto a device, does it stay working on your device, assuming your device is working, or is it dependent upon it being somehow available in a broader ecosystem to function? So if it disappears from the store and it was a free app to you or 99 cents or whatever, can you continue to use it? That is my question.
Okay, that's a very good question. We're talking here about applications on mobile devices and whether they stay available if, say, the app manufacturer goes out of business. And the answer to that is it depends. Some applications, a very small number of applications, do all their functionality on your device. And in that case, if the app developer goes out of business and the app never touches the network, you're good. But the vast majority, I would say more than 99% of applications, touch the network somehow for their functionality. And in that case, if the app distributor changes or you have a subscription and it runs out, then that application may cease to function or, in fact, disappear from your device. And this is why it behooves us to be careful that when we make accessible applications, in particular in assistive technologies, that they be made in a way that they will persist and be robust for as long as possible.
I just want to mention one thing. That under our advanced communication service rules, manufacturers are allowed to rely on apps, third-party apps. But if those apps go away in the middle of reliance, the manufacturer has to provide the accessibility of its achievability. So it's just something to keep in mind. The app manufacturer is expected, if it is relying on an accessibility app to achieve access, it has to make sure that it can support the app and that the app continues to provide the accessibility if that reliance is there.
Okay. Getting the signal for the last question,
Karen, this is Deborah Kaplan from Social Security. I was struck by what you said about the limitations on video relay services in other countries, and it made me wonder whether in this country, since the legal foundation for relay is the Americans with Disabilities Act, where you've got a foundational concept of equally effective access being the goal, does that make a difference? And to what extent in other countries are relay services provided under a civil rights framework, or is it a more charitable framework?
Debbie, I think that you have hit the nail on the head. There is no question that where you have a mandate that says that the service provided to a population that can't otherwise access voice telephone services must be functionally equivalent to those voice telephone services, you're going to have a stronger program. While I don't have information right in front of me as to each of the other programs, my guess would be that they don't have nearly the same type of direct civil rights mandate.
Okay. With that, I think you join me in thanking the panel for very informative. And turn over to Axel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our panel. And Matt, thank you for moderating in a very, very lively way. Thank you. We are going to go next to our panel on the issue of how to develop an effective mobile accessibility ecosystem, which is something that most service providers have to deal with here in the United States, but around the world. And so today we are very privileged to have 4 representatives of the main service providers here in the U.S. And to chair that panel is Frances West. Frances is the worldwide director at the IBM Human Ability and Accessibility Center. Frances West is charged with the worldwide responsibility of establishing IBM market leadership by promoting advanced research technology, products and services, and solutions in the area of human ability and accessibility. She is currently a board member of the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD, the Assistive Technology Industry Association, and the U.S. Business Leadership Network. Mrs. West attended the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Washington Lee University in Virginia, and graduated with a marketing degree from the University of Kentucky. I should also say that Frances has been a staunch supporter of the work we do at G3ICT since 2006, when the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was voted by the UN General Assembly. Frances, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Since we're the last panel, we're going to try to run through this in a very efficient way. First, let me just introduce my fellow panelists, Susan Masri, Director of Global Public Policy, AT&T Services, Jeff Kramer, Director of Public Policy and Strategic Alliances, Verizon, Scott Freemer, I don't know whether I'm...
Fireman.
Oh, okay, Fireman. Council of Government Affairs of Sprint, and last but not least, Harold Salters of T-Mobile. We did do a little bit, before this meeting, we did do a little bit of online collaboration, and thanks to Susan, she provided a framework for us, and that is we decided that each one of us is going to speak to like 5 areas that may be of interest to you, and I will read out loud to you the 5 kind of a subject area that we're going to discuss, and then each one of us will take turn to speak to that. So the first area is we will share with you each of the companies how we address accessibility through different means. And the question is, do your company address accessibility through assistive technology or apps and or other means? And why have you chosen the approach you have taken? And the second question we ask is that what are the factors that encourage your companies to provide more accessible technologies? Consumer, business, or government markets? Is it driven by regulation or public relations? Number 3 question is, how do you prioritize your activities? And number 4, what are the critical players in the system? And then number 5 question is, what are the greatest challenges you face in a global market? So just to share with you in terms of how IBM look at the accessibility, we are what we call a business-to-business company. So you don't see IBM product in the consumer space very much. What we do is a lot of infrastructure and integration technology business. So when we look at accessibility, for example, we look at embedding accessibility into our product sets. We also look at solutions, for example, workplace accommodation. How can we support our employees with disabilities? And we have about 400,000 employees around the world. And, we operate in 175 plus countries. So how do we build accessibility into our day-to-day workplace environment and make sure that the new technologies are absolutely included and also provide the maximum productivity for our employee with disabilities. So one of the example is earlier somebody talked about we need a lot of collaboration tools, for public-private collaboration, teacher-student collaborations. We came out with IBM a collaboration system. For those of you, the old Lotus brand is part of IBM now. And this is a social networking business platform, allow online collaboration. Embedded in there, there's all kinds of the social business technology like wikis or Facebook-like technology, all embedded in a private enterprise settings, and is fully accessible. So we think this is actually the way of the future. That is, you embed technology accessibility into the product that you use and also you sell in the marketplace. And we look at accessibility now as especially when it comes to mobile. We actually think that mobile is one technology that equalizes the accessibility experience. So what do I mean by that? Before the mobile revolution, when we go internally to say you need to build accessibility, sometimes we really have to spend a lot of time to explain what accessibility is about. And some of our business or finance people will say, well, how big is the market? And then you have to say, well, this is really one segment of the market. But mobile, just overnight, gave everybody the same experience because the real estate on the mobile phone is so small. All of a sudden, everybody realized the power of font size. I don't know about you, but when I got my phone, the first thing I do is to, increase my font size. And also, because it's such a small space, you cannot have, like 20 pages of content. What you want is a summarized content. So if you think about people with cognitive disability, information overload could be a significant problem. So all of a sudden, technology to do semantic summarization or to do analytics and to really pull out the relevant information presented in a right format in the font size become everybody's issue. So we actually think that mobile is actually helping us to really broad-base the topic of accessibility. So it's a very exciting time. I think earlier somebody said, if you design it for the people with disability, whether it's deaf or hard of hearing or cognitive or autism, you really, are building a very, very good core of user experiences that can be broad-based. What are the critical players in our ecosystem? Because we are not a device manufacturer, we're not a telco company, we are actually a consumer of mobile experience. Right now, one of the biggest problems we're struggling with accessibility is because for our company, we use it in the business context, in the employment context. We're trying to rationalize accessibility against privacy and securities. Earlier, I think the gentleman talked about autism, the surveillance or whatever. So how do you balance all that? And security, right now, I just got my new iPhone, but because of security reasons, I have to use 8 digits, both alphabet and number combined cell phone, and locks down every 15 minutes. So it's not really accessible when I'm on the road, driving a car, trying to make a phone call. Recently, IBM just bought a company that produce voice biometrics, kind of a technology. So we think that there is a whole new area of innovation that's going to be required that potentially will go into the biometrics field to ease the accessibility topic. Again, this is not just for a small segment of population, but for the entire population. What are we see as the challenges in the global market? We see, because mobile is one of these phenomena that came on so quickly, and you actually see a huge disparity between the mature market like the U.S., where everybody's talking about smartphone, but a lot of our growth actually is in emerging market, in Africa, in China, in India. Well, China actually is more of an exception, where the infrastructure, the speed, the availability of bandwidth is not there. So how do we make sure that we still can use a simple mobile phone, no smarts? A farmer in India can still participate in global economy. That's actually the things that we think about and we worry about. So this is a kind of the world that we lived in, and hopefully gave you a little bit of a background of what we do. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Susan.
At AT&T, we recognize there's many challenges that are out there in this field. 20 years ago, you never came to anything related to communications where they didn't talk about, is it ubiquitous? And now the key word is ecosystem or ecosystem, depending where you come from. And the reason that changes now is that there's so many players and so much potential possibility, so much that can be done, and so many things that can break what's working. So one of the challenges that we face now is that the communications field, information and communications technology, accessing information about what's out there and communicating it, and communicating among the players is a challenge. So who knew? In ICT, the ICT part would be the challenge. What we find at AT&T is that we really need to work with a variety of different players. The first thing we need to do is understand our consumer needs, including consumers with disabilities and those who are aging. Frequently in the past, a lot of marketing, a lot of research that was done inadvertently excluded people with disabilities. And now we need to make sure that when we are looking at the potential for market purposes, whether it's a commercial consumer market or a government market or an international market, that they take into the needs of people with disabilities and aging throughout. We have to do that in two ways. One, we have to work with our partners that is in the consumer, understanding their needs. We need to also work with the folks who are developing technologies that we will rely on and make sure that the technologies work together. What we see working well is when the tools to develop apps or technologies are developed in a way where accessibility is kind of the default, because while there's a lot of opportunity by having lots of different players out there, there is also a challenge of getting them all up to speed doing the same types of things in terms of accessibility. So if you can build it so that when something's developed, just by following the standard rules for development, accessibility is looked at, then it enhances accessibility across the board. And so we're seeing a greater number of tools, for example, for people who are blind, because some of the development tools that are out there and some of the requirements to sell these apps also look at accessibility. If we're not mindful, however, we can come up with many, many different apps that cause even more barriers. And as they're adopted, and we don't know which way they're going to go, it's hard to predict now, then the potential is having something that's out there that's relied on by the majority of the population, but is not usable by people with specific disabilities. So we need to work together to get the word out. So conferences like this, the M-Enabling Technologies Summits, the tours, the work that you all do in talking about the need for accessibility, the benefit of accessibility becomes even more critical because we have to communicate those needs. When you're looking at a large company like AT&T, to some extent it relies on training. A large extent it relies on having contact with the population you're serving. That means having our AT&T Advisory Panel on Access and Aging, which has representatives from the community that help us prioritize what we do, understand the needs, and recognize market opportunities. It means that when we develop processes, and we're in the process of redeveloping them fairly often because of the changes in the technology, that we're looking at the underlying needs of the community, not just checking off a box because, this can be done or it can't be done, and we want to go through the process. So we're looking at that. We also need test points within what we're doing. Is it working? Is it not? Sometimes we rely on community feedback. Sometimes we have user testing. It varies on the products we have. We also then look to the markets that are government markets that mandate some form of purchase of accessibility and hope to be able to prove a business case that way. And finally, we look at when we're developing products and services to be accessible and usable by people as they age and people with disabilities, that we're designing products that are more universally designed or accessibly designed and are more usable. So one of our success stories is a product called the Pantech Breeze, and I think we're on the third or fourth generation. And we developed that specifically looking at the needs of people as they age. And it was actually acknowledged by Oprah Winfrey as one of the top gifts under $100, but not for the aging population, for the general population. So we also see those benefits, and we have to track them. Finally, we need to make sure that we're taking opportunities not just of market, but also publicity. When we've released products in the past that have been innovative and address accessibility, there's often an opportunity for press that's positive about the company that helps our brand. that helps how we are recognized as leaders and give us more opportunities working with other groups looking at accessibility. So there's a range of opportunities out there. So what are the challenges? The challenges are, right now, we have development going on so many different fronts. On the positive side, it means products like Proloquo to Go come down to working with people in different parts of the world who have different types of expertise, who have an interest in one area, and they can communicate and work well and design a very specific need. But it also means that there may be a product that comes out a year from now or 6 months from now or 2 months from now that's an incredible app that everyone by default adopts and excludes a population and may create employment or educational challenges. And finally, you have an opportunity to look at, environments where you bring your own device. And so if companies are doing that, they tend to support, or schools are doing that, and you see that in Georgia now, they have devices, but they're not necessarily going to put the resources in making those devices or their systems work well with those devices if they're a low incidence device. So if you have a specialized Braille note taker that has Wi-Fi or Bluetooth capabilities, it may not be the first thing they design for. They may fix the problems for the people who have the iPads and the Androids and the different devices that are out there that are more common. So because it's low incidence, we need to make sure that our special education folks are supported adequately as well in an educational environment, and that our IT folks, our education, are working well enough with specialized devices as needed. Because in some cases, while I may choose to use an iPod or a Galaxy or something else for my work purposes, I may also decide that I need something that's specially designed. And so we need to have that expertise and that communication with an AT environment as well. So I think I'll leave off here and let you go.
Thank you. So on that, okay, thanks. Thank you very much, Francis, for the introduction and for the invitation here. As Susan mentioned, for Verizon, too, it's an integrated approach that we have to take across the board as far as accessibility and aging goes. Over 20 years ago, our former CEO, Ivan Seidenberg, adopted universal design principles. Certainly at that point, it was on the wireline side. It was to make sure that when we put products and services into the marketplace, that they were universally designed so that they could be used by anyone. And one of those principles, are very basic principles, but one of them was also to reach out to the companies we work with, the providers, the vendors, and make sure that they took that into consideration. And we put together accessibility checklists and trying to put products and services out. Clearly, as we've all been talking about, as we've gotten into this new age with this new technology, things have accelerated, and so we've had to put new things in place to make sure that we do consider universal design. And we do that in a number of different ways. As Susan mentioned, we have a consumer advisory board, so we reach out to third parties there. We have innovation labs, which we put up, one in California, one in Massachusetts, where we're encouraging app developers and people who are putting these things out to come to us and let's see what we can do as far as app development. Clearly, the iPhone helps a lot. On the Droid platform, we've worked with Code Factory and people like that to make sure that these products are accessible. Also on the senior front, I do want to focus a little bit on that because clearly for all of us, as we age, our certain abilities may fade and change, and so we're all going to need products that again are universally designed, something that we can use for everyone. So we spent a lot of time talking to third-party groups outside people like AARP, the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging. That's a lot of words. And Project Goal, which is the project to get older adults online, people like that to talk about what are the needs of the senior community as we move to technology. As Peggy mentioned, one of the issues we're also facing, as well as actually putting a product out there, is to educate people, the digital literacy component, which I know the FCC is doing a lot of work on, to make sure that seniors understand what's out there and the incredible benefits that are available through tablets or through smartphones. And also, we want to make sure we don't neglect the feature phone market too. We don't want to just say you have to come up to make sure you get a smartphone or a tablet. The feature phones are still available, and we've had a similar type thing. We've had a handset. The Haven was the last one, which was put in the marketplace for seniors, but because it was universally designed, or at least with that in mind, it's been very helpful to people who have certain disabilities as well, and it was a very popular phone, and we've moved on working with Samsung to put out the Gusto 2, which is the new version of that. So we've kind of integrated all these things as we move forward to make sure that, and we keep all these things in account, and for a number of reasons, but one of the things that's helped us really stimulate this moving forward is the fact that these are both the senior market and the disability market are very large segments of the population, and they love this technology, so they're out there buying it. So what we've been able to do, and what's really helped us in our efforts to move forward in this area, and to increase the offerings and to increase the staff, which always helps, and the resources within Verizon, we've been able to demonstrate on the bottom line the kind of impact it has on the company and in the community. We call it shared success in Verizon. It's a way to show that what we're doing helps the company, helps our shareholders, but also helps the community at large or specific segments of this population. So that's really helped us move forward and to integrate our approach. Also, on the globally, Verizon Wireless we have a partner in Vodafone, and so Vodafone has also been very active overseas in accessibility and universal design, and they've done a real good job out there. And they just recently announced they're having a competition for apps overseas, where they're providing monetary awards for people who come up with great apps. So we continue to do that, and that's part of what we're trying to look at as part of the global reach and how we can make sure that we're active in that. I think also we believe that the new standard that we're doing on the wireless side, the LTE, I'm sure you've seen the ads, 4G LTE, 4G LTE. But the new technology is something that's really going to help us globally to make sure that people can, use their phone, use their devices wherever they are, without any real problems. The critical players, I think we talked. I was kind of talking about that. It's really working with our manufacturers, with our vendors, with third parties, with everyone who's available in this ecosystem. I mean, we're all part of this, and we all have a say in what happens and how it moves forward. And so we've been doing that. As far as prioritizing our activities, it's a difficult question to answer only because we're trying to take all this on at the same time, and so certainly, like anything, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So if there's something we need to be doing, we'll certainly focus on that. But anytime opportunities come, again, that's why we're really excited about these innovation labs and talking to app developers. And when our vendors come to us and say, hey, look, we've got some real good ideas here, how can we make this work? We try to integrate that as best we can. And with that, I'll save my time and we'll move on. Thank you very much.
Good morning, or is it afternoon? I think it might be afternoon now. I'm Scott Fryermuth. I'm an attorney with Sprint in our government affairs area, and I've been working on various disability and accessibility issues for about a decade now. I'm here today, I guess, to talk about some of the efforts that Sprint has undertaken and kind of work into that, some of the questions that were posed by the panel or for the panel. I think the first thing to start with is that Sprint does have a long and proud history of serving customers with disabilities. Sprint TRS has been really a leader, I think, in the industry in serving customers with speech, hearing disabilities, and deafness. And really over the last, I'd say, 5, 6, 7 years, we've tried to sort of broaden our portfolio and make sure that we're also looking at customers that have vision impairments, cognitive impairments, and on down the line. So we've really, taken the leadership that we've had in the deaf and speech and hard of hearing, and tried to work that into serving these other constituencies. I think some of the highlights from Sprint's perspective is we've really over the last several years, and this has been from a broader company perspective, is we've put a lot of emphasis into improving our customer satisfaction, our consumer experience. And so I think from Sprint's perspective, we do prioritize by starting with the customer. We start with what the customer is looking for and then work things down on the line from there. So, we heard from consumers with vision impairments in particular that Sprint needed to do a better job in serving them and having products and services. So we put a lot of emphasis into that. So one of the first things we did is looked at some of our feature phones. We made some improvements there over time. We can always do a better job there, and we continue to look for ways to do that. And then with smartphones, that's been, sort of a breath of fresh air. It's kind of given it's more of a computer dynamic, a computer-like processing speeds and memory that allows the device to do so much more, and that's really assisted, I think, people with disabilities across the board, and those with vision impairment in particular. So we've seen the iPhone with the voiceover. Sprint is proud to carry that phone. And then we're seeing developments with Android. The last version of Android had some features and functions that were especially good for consumers with vision impairments. But we also saw that they didn't fully have all the feature sets, so we looked to outside third-party vendors. As Jeff mentioned, Code Factory is a company out of Spain. Sprint worked closely with them to launch an app called Wireless Accessibility. That app is normally available in the market for $99, and Sprint fully subsidized that. And again, going back to our priority, it was important for us to look at what the gaps were and to fill those gaps. And so we knew that with that product, with that third-party app, we could better serve our consumers with vision impairments. So we brought that in and launched that at CSUN this year back in February. And it's we've got a good number of downloads of it, and it seems to be a pretty popular application for us. And then we'll see with the next version of Android with the ice cream sandwich or ICS that they're improving substantially the sort of out-of-the-box experience of the Android platform. And it's just not limited to that as well. RIM is announcing that they're going to be building in improved accessibility features in their next release, and I think it's called Release 10. So I think what we're seeing is that there is a definite progression here in terms of what the devices can do, and we can augment that, of course, with third-party applications. And so some of what Sprint has also done is look to kind of what we can do on our end. So what we've done is released a couple of what we call ID packs. ID packs are available on the Android market, and they can be downloaded to the phone. It's sort of it's a way to sort of bundle together applications and make it easier for the consumer to find and use. And so we have two of those. The focus on accessibility one is the hearing impaired ID pack, and the other one is for the vision impaired. And again, the download numbers of those have been pretty impressive from our perspective. I think as both Susan and Jeff talked about, outreach to consumers is very important to us. I think we've done a much better job of that over the past several years in terms of working with a variety of consumer groups, the ACB, AFB, AAPD. I could go on with acronyms, but you get the picture. But it is, not to be glib about it, but it is very important to Sprint because it really gives us that sort of line of communication with consumers so that we can have a better discussion with our folks internally and with our vendors to make sure that we're closing those gaps. And I guess on that note, another really important thing is that as our priority, the way that the things have changed is carriers used to have this out front role in terms of providing the product, providing the service, and now things are much more open. So what we are trying to do, again, is prioritize the consumer and act almost as an advocate for the consumer back to the OS providers, back to the OEMs, to make sure that they have a full understanding of what consumers are looking for. So I think that what all of us probably here on the panel will agree is that we own the relationship with the customer. And when the customer has an issue, they typically don't call iPhone, or they don't call Apple, or they don't call Samsung. They call Sprint first. They call AT&T first. They call T-Mobile first, and Verizon, sorry. So it's incumbent upon us then to be knowledgeable about what's out there in the market and to work with those within the ecosystem, make sure that we are doing a good job of serving them. So a lot of that does have to do with, I'm being cut off, I think. A lot of that has to do with communicating and making sure that the players know what each other can do and are working together with each other. Thank you.
Thanks, Francis. Hi there. Good afternoon. Harold Salters. I'm Director of Federal Regulatory for T-Mobile, and I've been working on accessibility issues for about 10 years now. Started off with T-Mobile's launch of the Sidekick back in summer of 2002, which was the first messaging device which was wildly popular not only with the deaf community, but also very popular with the general population as well, and took messaging into the mainstream. So the perspective as I see it is that mobility is really the driver, and mobility is the imperative. The operating systems are the foundation for accessibility as we're moving forward. And the challenge as a service provider is to take the innovations at the operating system level and work with the handset vendors and make sure that the customers have a good experience. For example, I think at this point the driver for having accessibility, it's often called, Francis, you phrased it as the business case for ICT. I just want to commend to take a look at the following paper for folks. It's a paper that was written by a group called appsforandroid.org by Steve Jacobs, who's the CEO of the Ideal Group, and it's called The Business Case for ICT. A very good paper, and just gets into the enormous untapped economic potential that can come about as accessibility drives across all population groups. For T-Mobile, it really is all about the customer experience. So you have all these different pieces of the puzzle that need to be brought together. So you have the operating system, whether that's Google, iPhone, BlackBerry, and then you have each vendor's, each handset provider works with that. But then it's up to us as the carriers to make sure that our customers have a very good experience with that. So what we've done at T-Mobile is we provide support for groups like appsforandroid.org and provide them with the means to actually do in-the-field testing with a combination of the service plan, the phone, and the operating system to work all that together and make tweaks. Apps for Android has an application installation pack. For instance, there's Ideal Access for T-Mobile. And a number of these installation packs, by their very nature, focus on the visually impaired. The greatest strides that we've seen over the years, over the 10 years that I've been working in this, is with the rich graphical interface that has been coming up over the last 10 years. And that rich graphical interface has been very, very vital for the hearing, for the deaf and hearing loss community. But for the visually impaired community, that has been a challenge that has had to be bridged. And I think the changes over the major change over the last several years has been the incorporation through the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, of web content accessibility guidelines. And as the video descriptors and the other elements have been baked into the web operating systems, this has allowed for screen readers and other devices that used to be, years ago, you would have to have a big desktop computer to have a really good screen reader. Today, you have great screen readers in the format of a smartphone, and that's just been a tremendous development. I also wanted to talk about something else Francis mentioned at the beginning, which is I think the extent to which the regulatory environment has been a driver. And I just want to say with Karen Pelt-Strauss here that clearly the regulatory environment has been a driver, that even before the CVAA goes into effect, service providers have been pulling together all the different cross-functional elements that need to be put together in order to assess accessibility under the CVAA. And the statute itself is written in a way that drives it towards analysis of what the customer experience is. So for one of the best changes has been that instead of working in silos, driven by the carrier, everybody has to work together to make sure that things move forward. Just want to note about near-field communications and the developments there. These are very, very exciting. So that's a great example of an incredibly exciting technology that is really dependent, as Ann Taylor was telling us, on all the pieces coming together. So as Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich gets rolled out, you're going to see more and more handsets take advantage of near-field communications. T-Mobile, for instance, we currently offer, using NFC, the Google Nexus S, the Samsung Galaxy S2, the Nokia Astound, and the HTC Amaze, among others. I think from a customer experience level, what you're going to see as a mobile payments trial that is called ISIS rolls out. It's a joint venture of a number of the carriers at this table. And as that rolls out, and I think in Austin, Texas, and Salt Lake City, you're going to see some very exciting developments with near-field communications that just opens things up tremendously, especially for those with visual impairments. The ability to just point your phone at a target and have the target communicate with the phone in a very intimate way, meaning it's your phone and nobody else's, is really important. And even though things like currency readers are very important, I think the potential for NFC to having an electronic wallet is just tremendously helpful. I don't know whether I went over or not. I may have. I'm going to stop.
Okay, thank you, all the panelists. I think, given that the topic is about the ecosystem, I would just end our session by saying it's fitting that the organizer G3ICT, in their name is information communication technology. So as we go into the future, I think the communication providers are in the front end, providing the best customer service. But in the back end, there is tons and tons of information, right? Who would have thought that on a phone now, you in addition to voice, you now have text and you have video and all that, and we could be so ahead of ourselves to have so much information that we don't know what to do, and that could be actually disabling. So from information technology company like IBM, that's what we try to spend our time in, and to say, okay, how can we rationalize these information that's coming from different sources? How can we analyze it? How do we put it in a context that makes sense situationally? Like when you're driving versus when you're sitting versus when you're in the office. So these are very, very big problems or challenges that we all face. And if you don't solve the information, you could be communicating, but you're not adding value. And it could be just, a lot of non-productive communication. So I guess my last point will be that given that as we go into the future, the ecosystem partnership between the carrier, the device manufacturer, the information technology provider has to be very tightly coupled, very integrated to give you, the consumer, the ultimate experience. We actually require a lot of innovation. This accessibility area has been driven by very, very advanced human rights regulations, and the United States certainly is at the leading role of that. And we all actually, even in business, we recognize the value of those kind of regulation. But I think concurrently we must pay attention to innovation. And in my view, there's not enough research and development focus on cross-ecosystem innovation. I would love to see more policy as we are driving more regulation to be focused on, collaboration of the ecosystem. Allow all of us to have extra, research focus of the next wave or next gen platform. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Excel.
Thank you very much, Francis. Thank you very much to the entire panel. We would love to take questions, but it's very short. We are almost at the end of the session that we had planned for. So unless there is a pressing need for a question in the audience. Okay.
Hi, I'm Nick Sean Floyd from the Department of Homeland Security. My question, and it can actually go to anyone on the panel, but as operating systems have improved their level of accessibility, such as Ice Cream for Android, I noticed that a lot of carriers are kind of slow with rolling it out, even though Google has already released it for several months now. Is there going to be an effort to quicken the pace of allowing individuals to upgrade to the latest operating systems so they can take advantage of the enhanced accessibility technology such as the touch Wiz interfaces? And if not, is there going to be an ability for individuals to be able to upgrade their phones in a more quicker manner versus being on a 2-year cycle so they can then take advantage of this enhanced accessibility?
Hi, this is Harold Salters with T-Mobile answering his question. Actually, the ice cream sandwich upgrade is going out there right now. So, for instance, if you bought an HTC Amaze with T-Mobile about 6 months ago, just in the past 3 weeks, ice cream sandwich was rolled out to your handset. You have to realize that these handset system-wide upgrades are very, very big application pushes in terms of dozens, if not hundreds, of megabytes big. And so it is quite a network challenge to make sure that those go out to each of the handsets, that the handset takes the entire push and then integrates it. Also, as you may have noticed, when you get a handset upgrade, you cannot use your phone during that 10, 12, 15-minute point of time. And, people may need to use their phones, so it has to be done at a point in time that the customer chooses as being a quiet time for them to do it. But it's certainly going out there.
So we have several questions. Do you have a microphone somewhere? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Peter Hayes. I represent several different companies. But my question is, there's a lot of talk about the handsets and the programming. A lot of these applications for people with disabilities rely heavily on the network. Video relay services, access to cloud-based systems, voice recognition, understanding that your distance to the tower, as well as the fact that many of the networks are oversubscribed, and every year you're doubling and tripling your network access points. Do any of you have initiatives to prioritize traffic for people with disabilities in these applications so that they can function better and do the job that they were made to do in a sense?
Hi, this is Jeff Kramer with Verizon. I don't know of a specific effort to prioritize for people with disabilities, but certainly as we're working through this whole spectrum debate about how to better utilize and make spectrum more efficient. I know we're all working on that, whether it's government sharing or purchasing spectrum or finding better ways to utilize the spectrum we have. I think that's what we're working towards, so that the prioritization won't be as much of an issue as it is these days. But I don't know that we have a specific plan to prioritize for applications for people with disabilities.
Okay, last questions over there.
Is it to me? Hi. Just want to ask a follow-up question to the panelists who'd be willing to answer this. Many of our members are still want to use the phone that does not have any data associated with it. So do you have just basic cell phone for blind individuals to take advantage of without data? And if so, what type of accessibility is available on them? The second question is follow-up to Harold's answer to the rolling out of new applications. What do you all do with respect to customer service training for user with disability? Because many of the Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T stores that we're going in to as blind consumers, some of the representatives may or may not know how to support accessible phones. Anybody want to take this?
This is Susan. In terms of the training, we do have required training for our customer-facing personnel around disability. Everybody is required to do it. The problem that we run into, and it's a significant challenge, is it's a low incidence contact. And so what happens is you train folks, and if they happen to be very good as people and as technology people, then they use the same skills they would have to work with any other customer, and they go online and they look at the support tools and they recall things, or they call people, or they go to our National Center for Customers with Disabilities, and they do a great job. But then you have some folks who are not as good in general, and that has been really the challenge, is that they're not being reinforced on a daily basis like they are on pricing or main features, and they may not always recall, although we have support. I don't think, and AT&T is not the only company that does it, has support systems in place and specialized customer care and second tier, third tier types of support, so that if you have, let's say you're working with an Android phone, we might refer you to, if you're using TalkBack, to go to OneSource, or if you're using our Code Factory software, which we also provide at no charge for the customer, we might have more advanced questions that would go back to them. But we have to have that first step. And the best thing that helps us is if you do have difficulties or you see something that's wonderful, is to get back into the company and to write a note or to say, this didn't work or this was phenomenal, you should do this all the time. Because, in fact, the feedback that we get does get filtered into our future training. It does make a difference. If you are a salesperson and you do a bad job, we want to know. If you are a salesperson who does a phenomenal job, we want to know, and we want to talk to you, and we want to copy it and make sure other people know about it as well. I mean, one of the things I worked on the initial training, 10 or 15 years ago, that we did. And one of the things that came out of it was the customer salesperson said, well, why don't you just, instead of, providing information in this format and that format, you give us a card, but we can't give them a card, so it's not going to work if you can't see. So why don't you just tell us to leave a voicemail message, because almost everyone has voicemail now, with our contact information, and to record, pertinent information they may want to refer back to. And that's a very simple thing. But unless you're getting feedback from the field or getting feedback from customers, you may not be able to incorporate across the board. And now we see that type of thing happening more often. But it is a significant challenge, and I think working with organizations and getting feedback, working with individuals and getting feedback is particularly helpful. And I think that's where you have part of that ecosystem where you need that feedback loop.
I would just like to, hi, this is Harold Salters, T-Mobile. I'd just like to address Ann's question about feature phones. Yeah. And it's a dilemma. There is a real dilemma on feature phones. As Jeff pointed out in his presentation, feature phones are going to be around for a long time. And they work good for a number of populations. But let me just give you an example with T-Mobile's experience. For several years, we offered the Oasis talking screenless phone. And it's a feature phone, and all it did was phone, and it read you your contact list, and a lot of people liked it a lot. The company in Spain that made that phone decided to completely abandon the feature phone market and devote their energies to the smartphone accessibility market. So where you have an underlying ecosystem that is moving towards web compatibility, just seamless web experience, it's hard to still maintain that feature phone feature. So that's the dilemma.
All right, thank you very, very much. And again, wonderful panel and great feedback from service providers who I think are kind of the glue of the entire ecosystem, because you are the interface with the customer. And without that interface working and actually getting the innovation to go in the right direction and being actually channeled to the user, nothing can happen. So thank you very much for your feedback. I would like now to call to the stage Karen Pelstrauss and Ron Akins for a very brief announcement. So we would like to very briefly talk to you about the effort we will be leading this coming year from Washington to Washington. Last December, we had the first M-Enabling Summit. This session was meant to kind of get more feedback and more input into what we will be conveying around the world for the next few months. And then we'll be back in Washington with the M-Enabling Summit in June of 2013. So for that, we asked Ron Akins, who is the Executive Vice President of E.J. Krauss and Associates. E.J. Krauss and Associates is the company that has actually taken the risk with us to organize the M-Enabling Summit last year and the Enabling Series this year and next. And I think it's useful to maybe understand what were the motivation of E.J. Krauss and Associates to accompany GIST and ITU and FCC to actually take this initiative. of the M-Enabling Summit and M-Enabling Briefing sessions. So Ron, if you would like to talk briefly about your activity.
Ron Akins, and first I'd like to say thank you again to Axel and everyone at G3ICT, also Karen Pell-Strauss and her entire team at the FCC. We're the EJK on the signs there, and our experience has been in broad-based ICT events throughout Europe, Asia, Latin America. We've been involved in that sector for more than 20 years. But it's especially pleasing for us. We feel very privileged to be involved in the M-Enabling Summit because of the very specific focus that it has on mobile applications and services for senior citizens and for people with disabilities. So you've heard a lot about the global tour for M-Enabling with events that will take place in China and in Russia and in Italy. We have events in each one of those markets, our ExpoCom platform, and we will be hosting and working with G3ICT and other groups to organize meetings just like this at our ExpoCom event coming up in October 2012. Then we go to our ExpoCom event in Milan, Italy. ExpoCom China in Beijing in September. That's the first one coming up. And then October is Milan, Italy, ExpoCom in Milan, Italy. And then we go to Moscow in May 2013, all leading up to the M-Enabling Summit 2013 event here in Washington in June 2013. So you've heard the names of many of the sponsors at the prior event. Here, groups like AT&T and Research in Motion, Code Factory, Sprint, Doro, too many to name all of them. We're now reaching out to more companies to sponsor. It's not just EJK. These other groups have sponsored and supported the event, so we're asking more companies. We hope that you will be as supportive with your promotional budgets as you have been in sharing your valuable knowledge and your expertise in this important sector. Thank you.
And I want to say just very quickly that the next M-Enabling Summit will take place in Arlington, Virginia. Will be held at the Marriott Renaissance Hotel in June of next year, where we book the entire facility. And that will be actually a much easier commute to get there rather than this past global summit at the Gaylord National, which was a bit far, I think, for many of our attendees. So what you will see at the next summit is probably a much larger presence of tablet technology than what we had at the first summit. And also you will see a lot of new effort to lead towards specific application sectors such as special education or the way mobile is used for senior citizens in specific services areas and so on and so forth. So much more focus on significant application areas on top of the themes we had at the last summit, which were about the collaboration between the essential component of the ecosystem. So we are very hopeful that this whole global tour will end up creating a lot of more momentum in the industry, and we look forward to your continued participation. I want to say a special thank you to AT&T, who, I see Susan is still here, but both AT&T and Sprint have already expressed their decision to come and participate to the summit next year. Thank you so much. We look forward to have many more companies joining the effort, and I think this is just the beginning. So with that, Karen, again, thank you so much for hosting this meeting. I know you would like to say a few words to thank your team who does an extraordinary work. It's a pleasure to work with the FCC. Come here. Everything works so well, and it's fully accessible, which is terrific. Thank you.
Well, I just did want to thank the staff. If you would not mind coming forward, the consumer advocacy, consumer outreach division, rather, Kelly and Susan and Mikhail and Donice. And are there any others that I'm missing, Susan? Yeah, Mikhail and Sherry also. Thank you. And Pam Gregory, of course. And Becky. You guys make it look effortless, and we really do applaud you. You make our job so much easier. And again, I did want to thank EJK and especially Axel and Francesca. You too make it look effortless, and we applaud you at taking this on the road and making many people's dreams come true. Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody else for attending.